What is it?
Don't you play any of that heavy metal music tonight, Mr. Sovryn. I don't know what happened to you, but you used to be such a good conservative boy.
Whatever you say, missus, you should mind your own goddamn business.
What did you call me, young man?
Oh, nothing. Good night. Tell me what to listen to. Try this.
Come on!
Bringing his hard-hitting attitude and journalism to hard rock and heavy metal. Get ready to get rocked. Hard. And fast. By the podcast champion, the man of tomorrow, Dragonaut One Brian Sovryn, on the Hard and Fast podcast. And now, here's Brian.
Woo! It is time to get it hard and fast, baby, because it is the Hard and Fast podcast. I don't want to say your home, but certainly one of the sources for everything going on in hard rock and heavy metal. And welcome to the thousands of Dragonauts out there, baby. We are ready to go. And this is one of those episodes where I told you, of course, we just had our inaugural episode. This is episode 2 of the Hard and Fast podcast. But I had told you that there would be some re-releasing of previous material. But there will be, anytime I do that, I will make sure there's plenty of new material to go with that re-release material. That way you're getting something fresh, and it's not just some rehash. I hate that. I hate that when podcasters fucking just, they'll take, even like a best of show can be kind of fun, but you still got to give people something in the beginning, You don't want it to just be, it's like the greatest hits albums we were talking about, how you give at least, okay, sure, you're going to give them songs that have come before, perhaps decades before, but then you're still going to give them 2 to 4 new songs, right? It's that same attitude that I like to give you. But this is an episode where, now you've probably seen it in the title already in your podcast app, okay? But this is an episode where, you see the title and you're probably going, what the fuck? Again, this is hard rock and heavy metal. And let's be clear here, okay? There's going to be other stuff. Don't worry, relax. And I'll cover all this when you hear the re-release material. But we're going to talk about Bon Jovi. And I know, you're thinking that's not heavy metal. First off, I don't exactly agree with you, but fine. Let's classify it under hard rock, even though, as I established in episode 1, to me, electric guitar is electric guitar, baby. Fine. Okay. But you're going to get an album ranking for Bon Jovi and a breakdown of all that, because I think that's a band. And we mentioned them briefly. Actually, we talked about them. Now we're also going to open up with an album ranking of Mötley Crüe, which I said I would have loved to have done in the last episode, but I didn't want it to go too long. Okay. We're going to get an album ranking of Mötley Crüe here, but ironically, what makes this a nice attachment is that one of the things we talked about, that Mötley Crüe's Netflix movie, The Dirt, didn't exactly get accurate, was that the reason Doc McGee was fired as Mötley Crüe's manager was because he was spending too much time with Bon Jovi. Well, I'm a fan of Bon Jovi as well, and as I said in the previous episode, I kind of got it. Like, if that was the reality with Doc McGee, I understand why he would want to spend time with Bon Jovi. I mean, look, let's be clear here. Bon Jovi is a band that never fell from the top. They literally never fell from the top. They have always been on top. Bon Jovi is still, if you as a hard rock or heavy metal fan or something don't really care for them, you think, I don't know what the fuck you think about it. And I don't care. You can tweet at me at SovrynTech on Twitter if you want to complain with me about this, but I don't really give a shit. I think those boys, I think Richie Sambora, I think Johnny, I think David Bryan, I think all of them kick ass. Tico? So I love that stuff. And I'm going to give you a full breakdown of that, where maybe because the man of tomorrow, okay, because the podcast champion, tap the belt. Maybe because I give a breakdown, and I give you permission because, I think maybe, and I'm not saying I think I'm cool, but, maybe you think, the man of tomorrow's cool. If he listens to Bon Jovi, then it's got to be all right. And then maybe that gives you permission to do it. And I hope you do, because I think this is a severely, at least in the community that enjoys electric guitar, this is a severely underrated band, sadly. But, as far as in top 40 radio, I mean, Bon Jovi will own your ass all day. And rightfully so. Tremendous musicians. I even love, and I didn't do a breakdown, maybe at some point, I would love to do reviews, album reviews of all the solo work, John Bon Jovi's solo work, Richie Sambora's solo work, because there's plenty of both. Or even, RSO that Richie Sambora was doing with Orianthi when those two were an item and now they're separated, whatever's going on there. We don't know. Maybe someday we'll get them on the show and we can find out. Or at the very least find out that they're going to make some more music, because some of what they did for RSO, I really liked. Some of it, not all of it. And even Richie's done singles over the years. There's the one, I'll Come Back As Me, I think, or Come Back As Me, I think was the title of the song, which you can only get, I think, sadly, as I complained about in the last episode. I mean, fuck iTunes, folks. But sadly, I think you can only get it on iTunes. But I think it's a killer track. I love Richie Sambora, and what a hell of a singer. Most people don't even think about the fact of how great of a singer Richie Sambora is. Anyway, a lot of this I cover in the episode that you're going to get re-released. Now, to understand a little more about the episode that gets re-released, this is one where it was originally for patrons only. It was behind a paywall. It's never been, some of what I re-release has been, ironically, years later, re-released again. And I mean many, many years later. But we'll re-release it in the open here. This is one that's never been re-released. And it was patron only content. And I'll be honest with you, or I'll be frank with you. I don't like to say that I'll be honest. I like to think I'm always honest with you. But I'll be frank with you. That I get a little, you think I'm already uncensored? I would always get a little more uncensored, and still do, when I'm behind a paywall, because I feel like the people listening to me behind the paywall that are patrons on, that are part of the Zomi One Underground with Podbean and whatever, I feel like you are more invested. And so, I can, perhaps I can run my mouth a little more freely, even though I really don't have a problem with doing that at all. But sometimes I would discuss things in fact, where I'll even comment and say, well, I'm behind a paywall, so I feel okay, a little better about sharing this, because I'll share some of my wilder ideas. So anyway, that you might find interesting, because again, this is content that was originally only available in the Zomi One Underground, and it's from years ago when I did this. Another interesting thing that'll come up in the Bon Jovi album breakdown is I get on a bit of a tirade towards the end of it. And the tirade I get on is, part of that has to do with somebody we talked about in the first episode of the Hard and Fast podcast, which is Scott Stapp. Okay. And I say some things that maybe don't want to be, that wouldn't want to be discussed by members of Creed or Scott himself, but I still would love to have Scott Stapp on the show. He has an open invitation. I love his work, and I say as much, and well, anyway, you'll hear that, but it's apropos that conversation comes up towards the end of this episode, since we opened up last week, and I already got feedback from some of you when we opened up in episode 1 talking about Scott Stapp's new single, which is going to be a part of his upcoming album that he has with Napalm Records, that I still think is coming out in July. So anyway, if you haven't checked that out, just look in the show notes for episode 1 of the Hard and Fast podcast, and you can find it, or just look up Scott Stapp Purpose for Pain. I mean, it's a fucking awesome song. But anyway, glad others of you listeners, the Dragonauts out there, you've also said, wow, yeah, I don't like Scott. Some of you were saying what YouTube comments were saying, where I don't like Scott Stapp, but fuck, that was a great fucking song. Damn right. So anyway, you'll hear about that in actually, ironically, in the Bon Jovi breakdown, because I think and I bring it up because I think it's a similar case where a band like Bon Jovi, everybody thinks, they think something from Slippery When Wet or whatever the fuck they happen to think about it. And they think that, that's too cheesy, or that's something like quote unquote chick metal. Not my word. I wouldn't use that word. Okay. But that's what, a bunch of asshats out there will use. Okay. Or, they'll say something like that. And well, anyway, Creed falls into the same vein, right? Where people are like, oh, it's part of this metal scene. It wasn't that good, but somehow they sell hundreds of millions of fucking records, but they suck. Okay. give me a fucking break. I mean, we're not talking like, sure, the music industry, the record, the record industry, okay, they can produce, your Iggy Azaleas or whatever the hell their names are. I don't know. Izzy Azalea, what? I have no idea. Okay, I don't know. What they can make their pop stars that can do, maybe 2 million albums. I mean, today you're lucky if you can do 1 million. You're lucky if you can get an album to go platinum, right? But you can produce somebody that does it for a little while, but to like really, really sell, millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions, almost sounded like Carl Sagan there, babe. Woo, hail Sagan. You have to have something a little more. You can't just be what the music industry crapped out of its own ass. You know what I mean? So anyway, that's just a little preview of what you're going to get in this Bon Jovi episode that is their re-release, their album breakdown that is attached to episode 2 of the Hard and Fast podcast. Now, what we're going to open up with is entirely new material, which is something I said that I may do in episode 1. That being a album breakdown of Mötley Crüe's album, their discography. Now, what we're going to do is this is going to be an album ranking, not necessarily a breakdown where we go track by track and talk everything up. This is going to be an album ranking. This is something similar, a show that I loved and I'm sure and was very inspirational. I'm sure a lot of listeners to the Hard and Fast podcast also appreciated, which is That Metal Show, of course, with Eddie Trunk, and the boys there. And Jim Florentine, it was that was must-watch television every time it was on, wasn't it? I mean, fucking A, was that great. And, of course, I know, Eddie says it all the time on his shows that still go. He says, look, they don't have control of That Metal Show. If it can come back, they'd be happy to do it. But, they got to wait for that. So, anyway, or, the stars have to align in such a way to allow for the metal gods have to intervene, perhaps, to make that happen. But on That Metal Show, a lot of times they would do, in later seasons, they would do album rankings where they would pick a band and they'd say, okay, what's their best album? And they'd have, everybody would kind of decide, and they'd have to switch, and even the guests would get involved in everything. And at some point I'd like to do that, where, more parties get involved, more guests or whatever get involved with it. But for right now, you've got me. You've got the man of tomorrow. You've got the podcast champion. Tap the bell, woo, to make it happen. And we're going to cover this. So anyway, I want to Mötley Crüe, like I said in episode 1, definitely one of my top bands. Certainly what got me very much into the metal scene, so many years ago at a very, very young age. So I know their albums about as well as I could know any band's albums. And I mean, I really know them. I could list off liner notes, the whole thing, because as I talked about, when I got, I started listening to Mötley with Dr. Feelgood in 89 at 8 years old. Now, when I started listening to them again, teenager, it's when they did their re-releases of all of their, of their back catalog after Nikki Sixx got control of his, their own music, which is a crazy concept in itself that they had to do that. But when they got control back from Elektra. So I was very fortunate, to be there for that. And I just ate it up, because also what was really cool is that in those re-releases of those albums, you'd have like even more extensive liner notes. You'd have, where the band members were talking about the production of the album. I mean, they really did it right. And I just ate that shit up. Anytime one of the albums would come out, and I think they did kind of a delayed release where, 1 month, a couple albums would come out, next month, a couple more, and I was just ready to buy them up, as soon as they would drop. Now, I'm not going to cover any of their greatest hits albums, like Decade of Decadence isn't going to make an appearance here. I'm not going to cover their live albums, which they have very few. In fact, it took them forever to come out with an official live album, that being Live Entertainment or Death, which I think I said came out in 2001. That actually came out in 99. But anyway, and I also think I got the New Tattoos date wrong. I think that came out in 2000, I think, but I think I had said 99. But regardless of that, this is, again, no EPs, no bootlegs, no Japanese releases like raw tracks or anything like that. Just their straight discography that comprises, all told, 9 albums? I want to say that chalks up to, of course, with, Saints of Los Angeles being their last one in 2008. Now, I mean, they've had singles that I mentioned in episode 1 of the Hard and Fast podcast. There's, All Bad Things, Sex. I mean, and they're good singles. And they've had good tracks, if not great tracks, on, say, Red, White, and Crüe. Like If I Die Tomorrow, awesome fucking song. Sick Love Song, I dig that, or their cover of Street Fighting Man on that is really solid. We talked about the soundtrack for the movie The Dirt that had 4 new songs on it, which were pretty good, including the cover Like a Virgin, which I think was the real winner there. So, but I'm not going to cover those. At some point, those really should be included. I imagine there's going to be some kind of amazing box set that'll come out where all of that can actually be on there, because otherwise, those are also singles that you have to buy or either listen to on a streaming service, which fuck those, like Spotify or whatever. I mean, if you're streaming off of your own NAS, network area storage, or if you're streaming off of a Plex server or something like that, I mean, you're badass. You're cool. You're metal right there. All right. you're doing tech in a metal fashion if you're rocking it like that. I mean, fuck Spotify and a lot of these other things. But, well, I'm not going to get them as a sponsor, so I don't fucking care. But anyway, you'd have to buy these off of iTunes or something, those single songs. I will say that probably the best way to get your hands on all of these albums, minus, I suppose, Saints of Los Angeles, and I don't think New Tattoo was included in these as well, is to get, there's 2 volumes to it. There is the box set, Music to Crash Your Car To. There is Volume 1 and Volume 2, which both of those came out, the first one came out in 2003, the other came out in 2004. And that basically collects what they called those re-releases that I mentioned that started kicking out in like 98, that being what they were called Crucial Crüe. And it would say that right on the CD jacket, it would say Crucial Crüe on them. It is basically the compilation of all of those. And those are very worthwhile to get your hands on. They're beautiful box sets with great liner notes, the whole thing. I can't recommend those enough if you want to buy them physically. You can, there have been, like, Dr. Feelgood was re-released, I think, for its 20th anniversary in 2009, which had extra stuff that is not in those box sets. So there's certain ways to buy these albums. But really, like, Dr. Feelgood, I think, is the only one that actually had any kind of real 20th anniversary re-released. I would expect Girls to have gotten the, 20th anniversary. And I suppose it's past its 25th too, because that was in 87 when that came out. But, well, they're not getting that. So who knows? Maybe there'll be some kind of big re-release come 2021, because it'll be, however many, 40 years of the band, which that's hard to fucking believe that we're only 2 years away from Mötley Crüe being around for like 40 years. But okay. So, well, anyway, yeah, so just so you know, this is going to be straight breakdown of their 9 albums. Not going to talk about Music to Crash Your Car To, other than to let you know that's a great way to get that, even though you'd have to buy some albums separately, like Saints of Los Angeles and New Tattoo, but otherwise it's a very complete collection. But let's start breaking this down. Again, not going to spend a ton of time talking on any of these albums specifically. But just to give you a ranking, in my opinion, of what I think are the best, Mötley Crüe albums in order. Number 1 being at the top, number 9 being at the bottom. And we're going to start with number 9. And number 9 is something that I brought up in episode 1 of the Hard and Fast podcast when we were reviewing the movie The Dirt. And that was Theater of Pain, which in The Dirt, Vince Neil comes right out and says to Doc McGee, this album sucks. Oh, maybe it has 2 good songs. Of course, he's referencing Smoking in the Boys' Room and Home Sweet Home. Home Sweet Home, of course, will go on to be the biggest single that Mötley Crüe would ever have. But otherwise, Vince Neil felt like that the album sucked. I'm not going to say that like it sucked. It's just not, even though it's a different sound from just about any other Mötley Crüe album, there are other albums where it's a very different sound from any other Mötley Crüe album. In fact, I'd almost argue that every Mötley Crüe album has a very different sound. And we'll kind of cover that as we go along here. But Theater of Pain has a different sound, and it's a sound that just doesn't exactly work. It never really clicked with me. Theater of Pain was an enjoyable song, or not. I'm sorry, not Theater of Pain. The opening track to Theater of Pain, which was City Boy Blues. I dug that. Louder Than Hell was a good song, but Louder Than Hell was meant to be on Shout at the Devil. and it was originally supposed to be called Hotter Than Hell. If you get the Crucial Crew edition or the Music to Crash Your Car 2 set of Shout at the Devil, you get the original demo version of Hotter Than Hell. But again, Louder Than Hell, that's a good song, but it wasn't really meant to be on Theater of Pain. So, I don't know that it exactly works. There are some interesting things that get included in. Well, so it was on Red, White, and Crüe, which was the later track on Theater of Pain, which was Use It or Lose It. In fact, I remember when Red, White, and Crüe came out, okay, and this is in the aughts. And most people, when they were reviewing, like most music journalists at the time, when they were reviewing that album, they're like, why the fuck is that on there? If you've got a few minutes to put on a song, why is Use It or Lose It on this greatest hits album? I mean, it's a double disc greatest hits album. There's a lot of room to put stuff there, no doubt. But also Mötley Crüe has a shit ton of great songs, and most of them are not on Theater of Pain. So it was a weird inclusion for them to put Use It or Lose It there. I don't think that's a hit though. Like I have no data to suggest that somehow that was a major hit. I feel like they just wanted to like toss something on there that they thought was weird. But I mean, you could say, well, this was on one of their greatest hits albums, sure, but that doesn't mean it was a good song, at least, or it didn't stand the test of time. So yeah, Theater of Pain, easily the weakest album from Mötley Crüe. Might not be fair to start off with their weakest album, but once you get past this, once you get past Theater of Pain, it's, to use a phrase from Theater of Pain, it's home sweet home. I mean, every album after this is pretty damn good, if not an absolute 10 out of 10. But yeah, Theater of Pain is, I hope, I can imagine where for a lot of people back in, when this originally came out in 85, it's their third album, after Too Fast for Love and Shout at the Devil. I can imagine because of Home Sweet Home and Smoking in the Boys' Room, that a lot of people got introduced to Mötley Crüe via this album. And what a shame, because, I mean, hopefully they stuck around for Girls, 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 which would come out 2 years later. But, this isn't their best work at all. And at the very least, it would appear that there's some suggestion that Vince Neil was very well aware of that. So anyway, Theater of Pain at number 9. Let's go ahead and move on to the next album. Like I said, this doesn't have to take a whole ton of time. Number 8, I'm going to put, which is their last technical album of new material, full album of new material, that being Saints of Los Angeles from 2008. This was kind of a return album for them. There's a couple of songs that really stand out on it. That, of course, being the title track, Saints of Los Angeles, which has a really raise your fist, badass feel to it. I mean, it really does. And the music video is like in black and white, and it's like they're, a gang and just ready to, cause all kinds of trouble in LA. I love that kind of attitude. Mötley Crüe can certainly live that up, and they can back it up, or at least they certainly used to be able, in a very real way to back it up. But there's some parts to this. This album is interesting because it's one where there is a lot of, not that Mötley Crüe hadn't had help with, songwriting duties on previous albums, but this is one where you really feel like a lot of guys, came in and were, guys that you wouldn't expect came in and helped out with some of the songwriting duties and other things. And not to be uninteresting or not uninteresting, the music in Saints of Los Angeles, ironically, is loosely based around the book at the time, which came out in 2001, that being The Dirt. Again, well before the movie came out, Saints of Los Angeles, the album is in its entirety, was meant to kind of be based around the content within the book. Which, speaking of books, so the Heroin Diaries, which Nikki Sixx's band 6am would, kind of crop out of, James Michael, the lead singer for 6am, and DJ Ashba, who, guitarist for 6am, all make like writing and, some degree of appearances on the production of this album. Also, Marty Fredrickson, who has worked with just about every I mean, worked with so many metal, rock, pop, even country acts, collaborated with Aerosmith a lot. I think personally helped keep Aerosmith on top for so many years. He's also on this album. I mean, this album ranks low at number 8 out of 9, but don't let it fool you. This is a hard rocking album. This is a very contemporary, if I could use that word. This is a very contemporary album, especially for 2008, that makes Mötley Crüe sound really fucking relevant and really fucking badass in 2008. It's not a bad album at all. There's lots of great stuff here. The title track is great. Motherfucker of the Year. I love that song. Even Down at the Whiskey is a pretty good time. White Trash Circus. I mean, there's a lot of killer tracks on this. In fact, and this blows my mind, but you know, we just talked about Vince Neil's, what he thinks is the worst album, that being Theater of Pain, or that's a suggestion anyway. Saints of Los Angeles is apparently Vince Neil's favorite Mötley Crüe album. I mean, look, it's good. It's not that good, but it's good. I mean, maybe Vince likes it because he doesn't have to hit the highs so much on it, even though he still kind of hits some highs, but not at the level that he would say on Dr. Feelgood or Girls, Girls, Girls. I mean, of course, it's completely understandable because, I mean, fuck, you know, I mean, these guys do it when they're younger. You know, how do you keep going with that? I mean, unless you're, honestly, you know, unless you're Rob Halford, you know, from Judas Priest, who somehow the fucking Fountain of Youth can still hit, you know, can still do Painkiller, even though he says Painkiller is actually easy to do because you just have to hit that octave and you just go that way the whole song. But fuck, man. And anyway, most of them just for whatever reason, you know, and I get it. Like I'm not knocking anything about it. I mean, even the aforementioned Bon Jovi. You know, John Bon Jovi can't hit a lot of those highs in the same way. And you know, Vince Neil's well known live, and I've seen them twice live, to say nothing of concert videos where they really change things up. Vince Neil doesn't exactly sing things, and I don't mean tonally. I mean, like, he just kind of changes like the performance of the songs, when they do it live. This is not a rare thing in metal. I mean, Dream Theater performs songs sometimes wildly differently when you see them in concert. But anyway, so yeah, Saints of Los Angeles, Vince Neil's favorite Mötley Crüe album. Who the hell knew? Very, very fun album. It has a very different sound. Again, it has a very, you know, much more modern rock sound to it than previous Mötley Crüe. It really felt like they weren't trying to, you know, New Tattoo, which is on this list, of course, according to Nikki Sixx, was trying to sound like Shout at the Devil, you know, like it was shooting for that. This didn't sound like it was shooting for anything. And the only other album that I can think of where it really wasn't shooting to sound at all like Mötley Crüe as we knew it would be Generation Swine, which I would argue did it much better. And actually, that's going to be an album that I think that stands the test of time, but we'll get into that. But Saints of Los Angeles, a lot of fun. You know, and if you've never listened to Mötley Crüe before, this album's not going to hurt you. Like Theater of Pain might hurt you for becoming a fan. This one does not. It's really, really solid. And Saints of Los Angeles was a huge song. I mean, a huge, huge song. You know, very, very popular. One of the most like downloaded tracks back in 2008. I mean, it was a very big deal. So anyway, let's move on from that. And, you know, from the ending in 2008, we'll go to the beginning, 1981. Too Fast for Love. This is at number 7 on my list. Too Fast for Love. Okay, it's their first album. I know some people to this day still say it's their best. I understand that people think they like the rawness of it. I understand the band members alone love the rawness of it. Good for them. I think I'm just going to call this straight. I love this album. I love the, you know, Livewire, Merry Go Round and Round, Starry Eyes. I fucking love Starry Eyes. I mean, there's a lot of killer tracks on this, but it sounds old. Like, frankly, like it doesn't have the polish and the overall presentation. I mean, I guess it has the badassery, but not in the same way that some later Mötley Crüe albums would. So I get it. I understand where people are coming from with this, but I think they've got it wrong. I think 50 years from now, this is not the album that people are going to be thinking about in Mötley Crüe. And I don't think they're going to be thinking Dr. Feelgood either. But we'll cover that here in a minute when we get into the higher echelons of this list. But Too Fast for Love, how much is there to say about it? I mean, it's the original, you know, and it got them notoriety, certainly. Not as much as Shout at the Devil would, but it got them a lot of notoriety. It is a very raw album. I mean, it definitely has a badass attitude to it. And there's good songs on there. But it's nothing compared, in my opinion, to what Mötley Crüe would do later on. So let's go to number 6. Number 6 is also one of their later albums, that being, I guess you could call their penultimate album in their discography, that being New Tattoo from 2000. New Tattoo was the first Mötley Crüe album where, like, I was a major Mötley Crüe fan, and I was there and ready to buy it on release day. And I did, and I listened to the album over and over and over again on release day. I think this is a kick-ass album. I remember the reviews in the newspaper at the time when it came out, because the internet wasn't like the biggest thing yet in 2000. I mean, understand, folks, and look, I run a tech show. I'm a tech journalist. I know what I'm talking about. My opinion is the internet wasn't like all pervasive as we understand it today until 2003. So before 2003, other mediums were still the primary source for information and reviews and whatever the hell you were looking for. And I remember the reviews in the paper were saying, "Oh, you really miss Tommy Lee's drums." Look, I love Tommy Lee. I mean, he can be a dick, sure, and he has a big one too. But no, I don't miss Tommy at all with this. In fact, I saw the tour for this, the Lewd, Crude, and Tattoo tour. I talked about this in the previous episode of Hard and Fast podcast. I thought Sam Maloney, when she took over for, rest in peace, Randy Castillo, when she took over on drumming duties, I thought she was great. I wish they would have kept her. She would have been fantastic on Saints of Los Angeles. But again, I get it. Tommy Lee does his thing. I mean, Tommy Lee had an interesting solo career, outside of all this stuff. But regardless, New Tattoo, I think, is an awesome, 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 awesome album. Opens right up with Hell on High Heels, which was, I think that was actually an older song, if I remember correctly, that they kind of pulled from the archives, and it sounds like it, and not in a bad way, but it's solid. And then it doesn't stop. This is an amazing album. Next to, like, if there's anything they actually achieve, like Shout at the Devil, it's that this album feels like the song just keep on hitting you. And you can listen to the whole thing in succession. Shout at the Devil does that. Not every Mötley Crüe album does that, where like it feels like there's a tonal consistency, where the songs all just seem to flow right after each other. This is one where all the beats, even when there's a shift in it, like when you get to the ballad New Tattoo, which is arguably the biggest song off of this album, even when there's a shift, it doesn't hurt it at all. It just feels like that's the natural progression of how this album should go. Hell on High Heels, great song. Treat Me Like the Dog I Am, another great song. New Tattoo, bit sappy, one of the, it's not as corny as Without You as far as ballads go from Mötley Crüe. And corny sometimes is a good thing. Without You, I'm not the biggest fan of that song. But New Tattoo works. Drag Strip Superstar, just fun. First Band on the Moon, fantastic. Just killer track. Lots of fun. And the idea of like Mötley Crüe playing to when an asteroid's going to come down and hit the earth is just the perfect attitude for that fucking band, and metal as hell. So I love it. She Needs Rock and Roll, very sexy, little rocker. There's this weird kind of like roll of the bass on this, of the bass guitar that I don't know what exactly they were thinking, but I think that's part of what gives it that tonal consistency. She Needs Rock and Roll goes into Punched in the Teeth by Love, which is another fun, badass, almost punk song in a way. That is one that they would actually play live on that tour. They would play Punched in the Teeth by Love. They'd play Hell on High Heels. They wouldn't perform New Tattoo, interestingly. They would play that at the end of the concert, and you can watch the DVD of Lewd, Crude, and Tattooed of that tour, to see how that all shapes up. But Punch in the Teeth by Love is one of the ones that they would play live, and it was really cool. Hollywood Ending, one of the weaker songs here. A little bit of a ballad, but a little bit, but it works. Fake, good song. Porno Star, very fun. Very fun. That Porno Star and First Band on the Moon are just a lot of fun on this. In Porno Star, you get all the, the moans and everything, and they're talking about all the usual excessive stuff that Mötley Crüe is so well known for. In the song, I really dug that. White Punks on Dope is the cover song that they do, of course, from the Tubes at the end of it, and not the most fitting ending, but it's fitting for them to end the album with a cover track. I just thought of this. There's another great song that you got to hear off of Saints of Los Angeles. Animal, that's kind of a ballad. Oh, it's so fucking sexy. So hot. Check that out. Before we get too far from this era of Mötley Crüe, make sure you listen to Animal. There have been a few different releases of New Tattoo with like some tour material and some demo stuff. Nothing that sometimes your bonus tracks, like there's the song Time Bomb. Sometimes your bonus tracks are actually that come out in other regions, in other geographies, are the best songs on the album. Time Bomb's a fine song, but it's not like you're missing anything if you don't have it. But it works overall. So anyway, yeah, New Tattoo, an album that doesn't get enough credit from the Crüe, in my opinion, and really needs to get listened to again. Again, it's at number 6. That's 6 out of 9. I mean, you're getting a top 10 of albums here. Every album here is really good or great. So, just because it's lower on the list doesn't really mean that you shouldn't listen to it. Except for maybe Theater of Pain, maybe. So anyway, let's go to number 5. Number 5 is that album that got me started on this whole damn thing, and that being Dr. Feelgood. And you're saying, what the fuck? How is Dr. Feelgood at number 5? Well, Dr. Feelgood's great. Just like I was saying, just because an album's lower on the list doesn't mean it's not fucking amazing. I mean, Dr. Feelgood is one of the best-selling albums of all time, not for Mötley Crüe, for anyone. I mean, it's a massive hit, had a massive tour. You don't even need to go down the songs on it. Everybody knows these songs. These songs still get played today. In fact, someone commented on the Podbean app for Zomia 1 and actually said like it was amazing that Dr. Feelgood was like the theme song for the villain in Highlander: The Final Dimension. That's pretty funny. It's true. But I mean, this is just a massive album, straight up. Best song on there, in my opinion, is actually She Goes Down. I love that song. The Zipper Effect, I've used that in my own audio theater, and I was totally inspired by She Goes Down. The lyrics are sexy. Everything about that is great. Obviously, Kickstart My Heart, Dr. Feelgood. I mean, you could go down the list of songs on there, Same Old Situation, Don't Go Away Mad, Just Go Away. I mean, there's almost every song on here is a hit. Without You, like I said, that's probably like the least liked ballad by me for Mötley Crüe, but every song on here is pretty much a hit. Rattlesnake Shake would even get used a lot. If you get certain later editions of it, there's a song called I Get It for Free that has the Nasty Habits, which is the two women that have been singing with Mötley Crüe. They did singing duties or backing vocals for Girls, 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 or for songs on Girls, Girls, Girls. And then they also continued their duties with Dr. Feelgood. Get It for Free has more of them in it. It's a good song. If you can get the addition of Dr. Feelgood with Get It for Free on it, I mean, I recommend that. I think it's a nice addition of a song on there. So, and if you've never heard it before, you're like hearing new music from the Feelgood era, and you can't go wrong. But anyway, number 4, let's move on to number 4. Of course, Dr. Feelgood came out in 89. Number 4 is the follow-up full-length album to Dr. Feelgood. And this is probably the most controversial Mötley Crüe album out there. That being Mötley Crüe, what we call Mötley Crüe 94, where we did not have Vince Neil. Vince Neil was doing a solo career. And we had John Corabi, who would, of course, later on go on to do Union with Bruce Kulick and so on. I like Corabi's voice. Very raunchy, very, very, just very guttural. I mean, and it's not screamo, though, but like, it can still be melodic, but it sounds like really gruff and badass. I totally dig Corabi's voice. Mötley Crüe 94 is a completely underrated album. We talked about this a little bit in our previous episode. Totally underrated because again, as other journalists have said, if you didn't say it was Mötley Crüe, this would have been one of the biggest albums of 1994. I totally agree with that. It opens right up with Power to the Music. Killer track. I mean, just get you, right with the opening riffs of it, it just kicks your ass. Hooligan's Holiday is recognized. It's never going to get performed by Vince Neil, obviously, but it's recognized that's a genuine hit. Like, that worked. Hooligan's Holiday is a really cool song. In fact, there's like an extended version on Supersonic Demonic Relics that I think works very well. It gets a little bit of some like, I don't know, remix synth and stuff in there, and it's really cool. But there's even more beyond that. Misunderstood, killer song. Uncle Jack, killer song. I mean, there's a lot of great tracks on this album. It is a badass album. There's nothing else out there that really sounds quite like it. And like I said, Corabi's vocals are really cool because They are, again, they're gritty, they're gruff, but he's not Suicide Silence, right? He's not Screamo. He's not, like that, but like he still sounds, he's not the high pitch of glam metal or whatever you want to call that kind of metal. I mean, no derogatory reference to it at all. He's not Kip Winger, right? And I love Kip Winger, don't confuse me, but it works with what Mötley Crüe is delivering, and it's just a badass album. I mean, and that's the only way you could say it, is that it's badass. And you listen to it, just put on Power to the Music, and the first word that's going to come to your mind is badass. I guarantee you. Maybe it'll be fucking badass. It'll be 2 words, but that's what you're going to end up with. We'll go on to number 3 here after Mötley Crüe 94. Again, give that album a chance if you never did. I think a lot of Crüe heads, a lot of like really hardcore Mötley Crüe fans actually skipped that album, which is sad. Now, but don't skip it. Now, another one that I think a lot of people skipped was originally, was it going to be called Penthouse 5? I think was the original title for this, because originally it was going to have, this came out in 1997. Originally it was going to have John Corabi doing the vocals on it. But Vince Neil comes back into the band, solo career, who knows, isn't doing well, whatever the situation is. And of course they do their successful return after 5-6 years, of being broken up, at the Grammys, where they perform what's called Shout at the Devil 97, which is like an up-tempoed, heavier version of the song Shout at the Devil from, the classic 1983 album, Shout at the Devil. Generation Swine is the official title of the album, and this is at number 3. I love this album. It took me, as a teenager, like 5, 6, maybe 10 times, and I was willing to do that, and as a teenager, you have the time, right? It took me quite a few listens to really understand what Mötley Crüe is doing here. They were kind of reinventing themselves. It's a very weird album for a few reasons. One is as I said, it was supposed to originally have Corabi doing the vocals, and instead Vince Neil comes back. So there's some shift that has to happen, melodically, tonally, etc. But Generation Swine is, I think it's track for track. I don't think there's a bad track on the album. There's a lot to enjoy as far as it goes. It's a heavier album, might even be the heaviest album that they've ever done. It has some wild, like, electronic additions. Certainly Tommy Lee was getting very experimental, I think, with this album as well. And, you get kind of a feel to what he had done with Planet Boom during the 94 era of Mötley Crüe. But anyway, opens right up with Find Myself. Then there's the song Afraid, which ironically, the song Afraid is kind of the big single off of this album. I think it's the weakest song on the damned album. But then it goes into Flush, then Generation Swine, which actually Flush, John Corabi did some of the co-writing on that. Generation Swine is, has some of the stuff, you can see where Mötley Crüe at times tries to be a little punk, little extra rebellious on things. Generation Swine's one of those songs. Confessions, then Beauty's one of the best tracks on there. Very, very different vocals. Vince Neil's in there, but then you're getting vocals from like Tommy Lee and others, involved in it, and it works out really cool. The ballad on this album, Glitter, beautiful, beautiful track. Beautiful track. One of their best ballads, if not their best ballad that they've done. And it was ballsy to do a ballad, in my opinion, anyway. But Glitter is a fantastic song. It would show up on their greatest hits album that came out, was in 98, in a remix version. The remix version does not do this song justice. This song is great as it is. No remix, no chaser. So Glitter is worth it alone. In fact, I think they even wrote that song with Bryan Adams of all people, which fuck yes. I love Bryan Adams, and it shows. It's a gorgeous song. Anybody out there, just really heavy, coming in, Want to Be Your Dog? The whole thing. The next song was the song that really hit me. And it almost feels like a Pantera song in a way. And it's called Let Us Pray, but it's Prey. Killer heavy track, and Vince Neil is delivering vocals, just like a machine gun. It's really, really something. Love that. Rocket Ship, Nikki Sixx sings on this, and it's a very simple song. It's weird. It sounds kind of stoner, but it works. Before really, I think stoner rock was such a thing. They're ahead of it. A Rat Like Me, another fun song. Shout at the Devil 97, of course, which, kind of brought them back in at the Grammys and, announced that they had reunited. The four bad boys were back together again. I like it historically, I've liked it better than I like the original version of Shout at the Devil. But they both work on their own merits to where really they're very different songs. Then after that, you have the song Brandon, which is, it's a very nice ballad by Tommy Lee. It's very cheesy, singing it to his son that he just had with Pamela Anderson, or Pamela Lee at the time. You know, I get it that it's cheesy, but I thought it was sweet, and I thought it was nice, and, you know, go for it, boy. If if you're at that point, you're Mötley Crüe, why the hell not? So I think this is a very unique sounding album, and it's a uniqueness, though, that ended up working, and it's something that just kind of was really born out of the chaos of reuniting with your original lead singer, having a lead singer initially that you wrote a lot of the stuff for, who has almost the polar opposite of a voice to Vince Neil, that being John Corabi. And to have this come together in a lot of different musical styles, I mean, this is a chaotic album, but it's beautiful because of that, and especially in 1997. So it takes time to get used to it, but I put it in number 3. I think it's a great fucking album. And I think I mentioned this earlier, this is the album that I think 50 years from now, people are going to remember Mötley Crüe for, because there's nothing else like it in the world. And it's unbelievable that it's Mötley Crüe. I mean, you can totally tell it's Mötley Crüe, but it's like, what the fuck was that, you know? So anyway, let's go to number 2, and this is 1983's Shout at the Devil, their sophomore album, their second album. A lot of people consider this, it's usually between this and Too Fast for Love, where a lot of your music snobs and your journalists and whoever think this is their best album. I can understand this one much more than I can understand Too Fast for Love. This is a raw, raunchy, but has a consistent style, as to where I don't think Too Fast for Love has a consistent style. It has a message. It has a point. They are going out, they are taking names, and they are kicking ass with this album. There are so many songs off of this. Helter Skelter, Red Hot, even songs that weren't supposed to be on it, like we mentioned before, Louder Than Hell, which is supposed to be hotter than hell. Totally works when you hear it, when you listen to it, and that's included on the CD. Or the opening up with even like there's like in the middle they do the God Bless the Children of the Beast. Even that works. But that opening up within the beginning that leads into Shout at the Devil is so cool. And they've, basically opened up every concert within most concerts, most tours. They open up with In the Beginning. And, I love that little story. I don't know what it was at the time. There was some weird post-apocalyptic concepts going around, frankly, because also around the same time is when we get what? We get Lick It Up from Kiss, which their music videos were all post-apocalyptic stuff. You definitely get the same thing with Shout at the Devil, in their music videos as well. I mean, it's apparent, from Too Young to Fall in Love, killer song, Shout at the Devil, and so on. I mean, it's just, it's name of the game there. And it's interesting to note that, like, over the years, Mötley Crüe would, or at least Nicky, would go back to the war paint of Shout at the Devil. I mean, he certainly loves this album. And it's the only album where it seems like Mötley Crüe has tried to replicate its sound in the future. Whatever success you feel they've had is a different story, but they tried. And that's because, again, on any given day, this could be my number 1. But I didn't list it as the number 1 for this episode. My number 1 album for Mötley Crüe is Girls, Girls, Girls from 1987. There are just so many great songs. It doesn't flow, believe it or not, it doesn't flow as well as New Tattoo, in my opinion, but the songs themselves are so strong. Each one of them is so strong. Wild Side, obviously. Girls, 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 just one of the greatest songs ever written. Dancing on Glass, lots of fun. Bad Boy Boogie, even that's kind of fun. No, it's just a slow little weird thing, and whatever, it's fine. I don't know why the hell it's there, but there it is. 5 Years Dead, very fun song. All in the Name of Kick-Ass. That, we talked about during Red, White, and Crüe, like they put Use It or Lose It on it. If you want to put on a track that people maybe like had forgotten and is a total hit, I would have put All in the Name of on there. I mean, that was huge. Or that was like a song. I think they did that at the Moscow Peace Festival. Like, why the fuck not play that? Something for Nothing. Another fun. I mean, a lot of this Girls, Girls, Girls sounds like, you're walking into some like almost a Texas bar or something, but it's metal, right? But it's, it's hard rock. And I don't know, it works. It could have been the soundtrack for one of the greatest movies ever, that being Roadhouse and Patrick Swayze. Hell, it could have been the soundtrack for that, and it would have worked. And I don't know, there's something very cool about it. But anyway, then it goes on to You're All I Need, which, funny story around You're All I Need, which is it's a ballad, but like, it's fucking tragic. Like, 'cause it's about the guy killing his girlfriend, I mean, it's really bad. But it's funny because John Bon Jovi, back in 87, he hears this song and he says, fuck. And he tells Doc McGee. Doc McGee told this story years ago. I guess this is at the time where they were both, he was managing both Bon Jovi and Mötley Crüe. And he's telling Doc McGee, he's like, look, he says, I'm done. He says, I've heard the greatest ballad ever. And it's Mötley Crüe's You're All I Need. And Doc McGee goes, John, don't you know what that song's about? That's no love song, baby. Like this song's a fucking tragedy. It's terrible. And, I don't like listening to it because I mean, it is as far as like melodically, it's a beautiful song, but it's a fucked up, like the lyrics are fucked. And it's the video, shows it, and it's just really, really dark shit. So I generally skip it, but I recognize that quote unquote, it's a great song. Right. And then it ends off with, they cover the King. They cover Elvis Presley with Jailhouse Rock, and fuck does that work, man. I mean, that really, 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 really works. So now apparently there was a DVD reissue of Girls, Girls, Girls that has like a bunch of interviews and stuff on it. So I guess they kind of did do a 20th anniversary for this. Cause this was a big album, not as big as Dr. Feelgood, but dang near, as they say. Anyway, you can get different versions of this. One of them has like a song on there called Rodeo. It's interesting. But yeah, I mean, just the basic 10-track album is just one of the most kick-ass rock albums you're ever going to listen to in your life. I think it's an absolute 10 out of 10 album. A lot of the ones that I listed here in the upper echelons, Shout at the Devil, I think is a 10 out of 10 album. Generation Swine, ironically, I don't know if I'd give that a 10 out of 10, but it'd be close. It'd be tough for me to not say that. Dr. Feelgood would be a 10 out of 10. I mean, so many of these Mötley Crüe albums are 10 out of 10s. If they're not 10 out of 10s, they're awfully close. To being that. But Girls, 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 there is just an attitude. In fact, it's an attitude that I don't think has ever really been totally replicated, even though bands have tried. Even more modern bands, or relatively modern, like The Las Vegas and Kissing Dynamite and some of these other ones, where I feel like they've tried to replicate the attitude that Mötley Crüe is putting on display with Girls, Girls, Girls specifically, and they never totally do it. There was a magic happening here. And there's a conversation to have around that, but I'm going to save that for another time because it has to do with the consumption of a lot of different shit that a lot of different bands did at this time. So, but that, like I said, that's another conversation for another time. So there you go. There's your breakdown, your ranking of Mötley Crüe's albums, all 9. Number 9, Theater of Pain. Number 8, Saints of Los Angeles. Number 7, Too Fast for Love. Number 6, New Tattoo. Number 5, Dr. Feelgood. Number 4, Mötley Crüe 94 with John Corabi. And number 3, Generation Swine. Number 2, Shout at the Devil. And then number 1, Girls, Girls, Girls. So anyway, we're going to take a little break. After the break, it's going to come back, and it's a re-release, okay, of a Bon Jovi album breakdown, and it's lengthy. Okay, spent a lot of time on that one because I'm trying to fucking convince people. I don't think I have to convince you to listen to Mötley Crüe if you're already listening to the Hard and Fast podcast. I might have to convince you to listen to Bon Jovi, and it's my attempt at doing so. So if it sounds like I'm talking 2-3 years ago, it's because I was talking 2 or 3 years ago, and I am just going to let the music ride that one out. Okay, I'm not going to come back at the end of this episode, so I'm going to say it here. Enjoy the re-release of what was previously pay-for only content behind a paywall. Enjoy that, and I will, well, anyway, metal on, everybody. I'll see all of you on the other side. Woo! Hey, when you're going to your next rock show and need a hotel, don't forget to use booking.hardandfastpodcast.com. Booking.com gets you the best prices all around the world, no matter where your next rock show is, and is loaded with reviews so that you get the best rates and the best hotel rooms because, woo, you never know who or how many people might be going back to your hotel room later that night, baby. Woo! And if you use the URL booking.hardandfastpodcast.com, you'll get a $25 cash reward. Can you beat that? Again, use booking.hardandfastpodcast.com to get $25 and the hottest rooms at the hottest prices. Booking.hardandfastpodcast.com. And don't forget to put up the do not disturb sign, baby. All right, let's get back to the show. Woo! Oh, now, I don't know what came to your mind when you saw the title to this little bit of Patreon content. But regardless, I hope you'll give it a chance. If you're into music, if you're into like rock or even quasi metal or something like that, if you're into that kind of music. This has been, so I did for Patreon a few months ago, I did where I broke down, and like the episode almost went, I think, like 3 hours because there was so much to cover. This one will not do that. But I broke down and covered and ranked every Kiss album to ever come out. And that included like the Alive albums. There might have been, a certain category or subset of albums that I didn't count. But I just, broke them all down and said, all right, here's why, this is the what and everything. And it was a very popular show. Okay. Now there's admittedly a lot of bands that I could do that kind of, and bottom line, more people have wanted me to do this, do these kinds of episodes. So that's why I'm doing it. This is Patreon requested content, not necessarily the band I'm about to talk about, but this kind of content. And look, there, like I was going to say, there's a lot of bands that I could do this for. I could do this, boy, if you hear my computer, it's, I'm encoding some video right now, so so it's a little loud, but I could do this for, I don't know. The list of bands that I could do this kind of thing for would go on forever. Mötley Crüe, Whitesnake, Winger. Yeah, don't laugh. Don't fucking laugh. Don't make me do a Winger episode. You don't know how good, how great that band is. In fact, some of their best work has only come out in the past like decade, like literally in the past 10 years. Just tremendous shit. Don't give me any crap for that. I could do it for Deep Purple, which might even be longer than doing it for Kiss. It might even be longer than that episode, because Deep Purple is definitely one of my top bands. There's a lot of bands that I could do this for. A lot of artists, I could go beyond metal pretty heavily into a lot of the pop realm and everything. And kind of what inspired me to do this episode around is that, well, a new album came out by the group that I want to talk about. Okay, correction. It's not by the band, but it is by a ex-member now of the band, or I don't know if you can call him an ex-member. But anyway, the band we're going to talk about is Bon Jovi. Yep, go ahead, get your laughs out. Trust me. Listen to me when I'm telling you, okay? What I am going to describe to you, how I am going to rank this stuff, we're not going to get through, we're not going to get into, Slippery and Wet, I'm really not even going to rank that number one. We're going to do a ranking, okay, but we're going to break down a lot of the songs, and then this is stuff that the only thing I can imagine is you've never heard it before, because A, I know some of this shit has never charted on radio, and B, the amount of people that rip on Bon Jovi but obviously never heard these songs. I just don't know how you can do that and not and listen to the songs, especially the ones that I'm going to describe to you. This is a thing with a lot of metal bands, is that you usually have, or metal or rock, whatever you want, wherever you want to put Bon Jovi, and certainly that band has changed categories here and there from time to time. But generally, metal bands, as far as technical ability, usually take the cake. Like, usually you want the best performers, like musical performers, etc., and players, and often songwriters. You usually look at the metal scene, quite frankly. Either for speed, technicality, whatever. It doesn't mean they necessarily make the best music, okay? But it does. But as far as like technically the best, as far as what metrics you can put on skill and things like this, usually you're going to find it within metal. This lends a lot of these bands, hard rock and heavy metal bands, to writing, in my opinion, just a lot of great music. But there's so much great music that oftentimes it never charts. It would like during the 70s or the 80s, or maybe a little previous or a little after, there's a lot of songs that would just never hit radio. It just wouldn't. For varying reasons. By the nature of top 40 radio and other things, a lot of these songs would just never chart. And I think that does a disservice for a few reasons, because a lot of people get sick of the songs that they keep hearing, and they have no idea that some bands made great music well outside of anything that would ever get radio play, which I think is very much the case with Bon Jovi. It would just create this illusion that a band is maybe a one-trick pony, or that, they just don't have any other good music, and nobody knows, because you never really get to hear an entire album, or you never get to hear, kind of the hidden gems, as they would be called, or maybe the deep cuts or something like that, which are both full industry terms as far as music goes. And I think Bon Jovi is one of those bands that doesn't suffer. And I say it doesn't suffer because next to maybe Metallica and Aerosmith, Bon Jovi is one of those bands that for as long as they've been around, they've been on top. Like they've however it works. They may disappear for a little while, but sooner or later they just end up back on top. Or they just never leave. Maybe AC/DC could be counted in those ranks as well. I mean, if you went outside of the metal scene, maybe like Madonna. I mean, like these are artists that, even though they've been around for decades, they just, I mean, they always, it's not just like being on top of their game. Like you could say, well, fuck, Iron Maiden never drops the ball. Well, that's not entirely true, right? As much as I enjoy Blaze Bayley's work and X and all those different albums, and I really do love them. Whatever. I mean, let's be clear here that Iron Maiden has had its subpar days. And I'm not saying Bon Jovi hasn't had them either, but the difference being is that bands or, artists like Bon Jovi, Metallica, who also to a lot of Metallica fans have had off days, which I completely disagree with. I love Saint Anger. I love all those albums, and Death Magnetic and everything that and Load and Reload. I really enjoy the hell out of all of them. Aerosmith, I mean, people could complain about honking on a Bobo. It's still charted like there's no tomorrow. And I'm not saying that should necessarily be like the metrics to decide what's good music or not. What I'm saying is, though, is that these are bands that they're always on top, no matter if they've been around for 2 years or 20, or 30 or more. And I think that really, like, Aerosmith, Metallica, and Bon Jovi are kind of like the three great examples where, yeah, I mean, and it's just like they can't fall down from it for some reason, and they keep making new music, and it just keeps selling, and it still gets. Here's another key part: is it'll still get mainstream radio play, or whatever accounts for radio today, right? Because I mean, radio's still a big deal in the rest of the world, despite what Silicon Valley and San Francisco would tell you. But anyway, Bon Jovi's just one of those bands that whatever they do, it sells. It's still huge. It still gets everybody excited. You're still going to get all different kinds of, I mean, and a lot of people, look, I mean, we could talk about, Bon Jovi started in the 80s. Okay. So they're, sort of one of the later bands in what I've described, but they started in the 80s, and one would argue, a lot of real serious metalheads would argue that the reason Bon Jovi was ever popular with guys, again, I'm speaking very conventionally here, is because if you went to a Bon Jovi concert, you were guaranteed that there'd be a lot of women there. Now, I don't think that's true, but I do think the abstract notion I do think the fact that a lot of women were at Bon Jovi concerts is absolutely true, which would make them a hot ticket. Particularly at that time, and it was part of the reason that, yeah, I mean, I think there's some truth to it. I just think that that's kind of bullshit on the guys' part. Like, fuck them, for thinking that way and whatever. But yeah, I mean, let's be clear here. Bon Jovi worldwide has sold well over 100 million albums. I mean, this is one of the biggest selling bands in history. And a lot of that success has to do with, of course, what some people would consider their seminal album, that being Slippery When Wet from 87. From 86. Slippery When Wet. Let's just talk about this, right out, and then I want to get into the ranking. You know who Bon Jovi is. Give me a break, okay? But Slippery When Wet. Yep, I get it. You have on that album, you have like 3 or 4 of the greatest rock songs just ever written, just ever done. And just about anybody will admit that to you. Even if it's like a modern performer or something like that, they'll come right out and say, oh yeah, Living on a Prayer, You Give Love a Bad Name, Wanted Dead or Alive, maybe some of the other ones. I don't know if they'd go with Let It Rock or, Raise Your Hands or something, which was popularized by Spaceballs, or Without Love. I mean, they're going to call at least 3 of those, and just about everybody will admit it. Holy shit, those are like 3 of the greatest songs ever done. That's how it is. Disagree with it if you want. Be the hipster and say, oh no, that's not true. But even people within, I almost guarantee the bands that you listen to will tell you that, will give you that same answer, that those 3 songs are just 3 of the greatest songs ever done. Okay, so whatever, disrespect them how you want, but the people you listen to are going to give them the respect. So whatever. Anyway, so yeah, Slippery When Wet's on here. I give it full credit for what I just said. That, yep, there's like 3 or 4 of the greatest songs ever, rock songs ever in history that exist on that album. And that is a bold statement, because I don't think it's debatable. My favorite band is Kiss, personally. Bon Jovi's not at the top of my list. It's very high up there, though. But my personal favorite band is Kiss. I can't make that kind of claim with Kiss. I don't even think I could say that there's a single great rock song, or one of the greatest rock songs is done by Kiss. Maybe somebody would argue, yeah, you could say Rock and Roll All Night or Detroit Rock City, but like not to the level where fucking everybody knows the goddamn song. And I know, when I used to travel the world quite a bit, and this was well after Bon Jovi's prime, even though, like I kind of argued, they seem to never fall out of prime. Everybody knows, Living on a Prayer. Everybody knows You Give Love a Bad Name. Just everybody. Doesn't matter. They can't speak a lick of English. They can fucking sing you some Bon Jovi. They're not going to be able to do. I've almost never had that similar experience with Kiss or something. Okay. Now, Bon Jovi, to describe this, okay, and the reason that actually I hold Bon Jovi, I almost, as much as it seems in reality that Bon Jovi, the band, seems to exist outside of space and time, up until recently, finally John Bon Jovi, when he does the commercials for DirecTV or something, I think, he finally has gray hair, and he finally has some wrinkles on his face, because this guy, I was thinking he was damn near immortal. Like he still would look amazing, and the amazing thing too with John Bon Jovi particularly is that whatever the fashion is at the time, somehow he can still look like one of the sexiest men alive rocking it. And I don't mean music fashion, I mean like style. Like his hair, his clothes, whatever. He somehow is still just like, whether he has long hair, short hair, whatever, he just looks fucking amazing. And honestly, with his gray hair, yeah, he still looks sexy as hell. There's, I not taking anything away from him there. But anyway, so like I say, as much as Bon Jovi seems to exist outside of space and time, because no matter what they do and when they do it, it sells. I sort of hold Bon Jovi, like if I had a top 5 list, I sort of hold them outside of space and time, because Bon Jovi, so this is something I used to do quite a bit. When I was really, rollicking around with the relationships, how about I describe it that way? One of the first things I would do, and this was at a time when CD burning was still a really big deal, is, I would have the entire, whatever it added up to at the time, I would have the entire Bon Jovi discography, and I can't really do this now. Like, it doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense also to hand somebody an MP3 player or something. So this kind of trick is lost. And like, I don't think there's anything nostalgically nice about it with like giving somebody CDs anymore, because who even has a fucking CD player, maybe in their car or something. But anyway, what I would do is, if I was really into a gal, I would give her, like I'd buy one of those little, Case Logic, like 12 CD cases, or, where it has like the sleeves and everything. And then I would buy the company was Verbatim. That's the name of the company, Verbatim. They made rewritable or writable and rewritable disc optical media. And they had ones that looked like records, which were really cool. They were CDs that looked like records, and they even had like kind of a scratchy top to them, or like it had a texture at the top. That's the word I was looking for. And I would just make them a copy of the entire discography of Bon Jovi. And in fact, if I was still with the gal and the new Bon Jovi album came out, I would either mail them, or whatever, because sometimes I was involved in, long distance polyamorous relationships, whatever. I would mail them like, the new CD. And like, I would do this because, ladies my age, maybe this isn't all true, I don't know, because I know I have a lot of ladies that are patrons. But ladies my age, around my age, generally love Bon Jovi. Whether they listen to him regularly or not, if you put on Bon Jovi, they're all over it. They're all about it. And great. That's good. Okay? But understand that me, genuinely, without whether or not women were into it or not, I genuinely love Bon Jovi's work. Like, I think it's phenomenal stuff, and that's what we're going to break down here in this episode. and we're going to, we'll do the full ranking. So, but this is something I did a lot, and I think it helped matters out. Not that you can necessarily fuck to Bon Jovi, but it can definitely get you in the mood and can get you feeling like pretty, well, pun intended, wild in the streets, shall we say? Woo. And it'd be really nice, because like I'd go visit a gal or something, and she'd have one of those CDs playing, in her little Sony boombox or something. And again, the world's different now. You can't exactly do that, but at the time there, that had a lot of meaning, and like that really meant something. And also at the time, especially earlier on, not everybody had a CD burner, so that was kind of a rare thing. And that even gave you a little bit of an edge, like, ooh, this guy can make mix CDs. All right. So that was, that didn't hurt at all. But anyway, but that's how important Bon Jovi is to me. Like it's just been a major part at so many different points in so many ways, in my life. It's my life. Woo, pun. But yeah, so I want to do a ranking. And because if you've never really, like, if all you know are some of the songs off of maybe Slippery When Wet or New Jersey or something like that, or maybe It's My Life from Crush in that came out, was that 2000? If that's, that was in 2000. If that's all you know, there is a whole world of Bon Jovi you have no idea about. And there are albums that you probably never listened to, certainly songs you never listened to, that are absolute magic. That, I mean, they are just tremendous pieces of work, and they have stylistic cues to types of music that you would not expect. There are almost whole albums that sound like the Rolling Stones. If you're a fan of the Rolling Stones, which I am, I'm a huge fan of the Rolling Stones. There's all kinds of wild shit, because it's a very talented band with a lot of variability, and who got so big, particularly in the 80s and early 90s, that they could get away with doing anything on their albums, and they could put in some really, really interesting tracks on an album that would still have 4 or 5 huge hits, so that's what I want to break down to, or break into. And that's what, maybe you're having a breakdown because I'm talking about Bon Jovi. Okay. But anyway, let's do this. Let's start breaking them down. And we'll start from the top, we'll start from the bottom, from the least best to the best. How about that? Okay. Because I dare not say that I don't really think that there's a bad Bon Jovi album. I think they all have, some are very different from others, but they all have something special about them. They all have something that really works. So let's break into these. And I'm not going to do any live albums, and I'm not going to do any of the solo works or side projects, because John Bon Jovi, I think he has a couple of solo CDs that he's done, or at least the one. I'm not going to count the Power Station years. And Richie Sambora, who left the band a couple years ago and supposedly is welcome to come back anytime, whatever. It's not a situation like what happened with Alex Van Such, who was in the band and they fired. Like, they said, no, you get the hell out of here. Of course, that was back during the New Jersey days. It was back, before the 90s. And then they brought in, is it not Phil Lorre? Hugh Laurie? No, I think I'm thinking of somebody else. Anyway, no, maybe it's Hugh Laurie. I forget his name. Or maybe it's Phil Hughes. Whatever. So the guy, their bassist, it's amazing. This guy, everybody knows the drummer. Everybody knows Tico Torres. Everybody knows John Bon Jovi. Everybody knows Richie Sambora. But most people never really knew the bassist. That was originally Alex Van Such. And then they had the other guy come in. And this guy doesn't want to be known. He's in some of the pictures for things, but he doesn't want to be known, because that way he gets to play and have all the fun being in one of the biggest bands in the world. But then he doesn't get swamped at stores like John Bon Jovi does, or even like David Bryan, their keyboardist and everything, who's got a lot of talent. And he also has a solo album called Lunar Eclipse, but we're not going to get into any of those. But that, again, one of the solo albums, that being by Richie Sambora, who also is not in the band right now, he just came out with, of course, he got married to, or I think they're married to Orianthi, who is an awesome guitarist, known for her work with Michael Jackson and others. Anyway, They came out with like an EP today, actually September 29th, 2017, where it was like 5 tracks. I love it. I think it's awesome. It's called RSO. That's, I guess, the name of their band. And the album is called Rise. Not a very original album name, but whatever. But it's more or less an EP. The first track opens up really hot. And then the other 4 have a lot of varied styles to them, but I really like it. And of course, Richie also had that song, the single that he released, that was only available on iTunes, and I can't believe it. It's still only available on iTunes. The only way I have it is because somebody put it on YouTube, thankfully, and I just ripped the YouTube sound. But Come Back As Me, which is an awesome song. And also Richie had, he had his first solo album was a big deal back in, I think that was like 1990 or 91, which was Stranger in This Town. And he's had 2 others besides that, at least. But Stranger in This Town, Was it House of Blues or not House of Blues? Anyway, great album. There's a song on there, Rosie. If you want to hear something extant from one of the guys in Bon Jovi, the song Rosie is fucking awesome. That should have been on a Bon Jovi album. It is so goddamn good. It's heavy. It's got great licks, great lyrics, the whole thing. It's Stranger in This Town, awesome album. But I'm not going to get into those, and I'm not going to do any of the live albums, even though they've only really had a couple over their entire career, which is actually pretty impressive that that's all it's been. I won't, except for Crossroad. I won't be ranking any of their other, because Crossroad has like 4 or 5 new songs on it. But I won't be ranking their greatest hits albums. Even though there's the album This Left Feels Right, which is kind of what you could call a remix album, but it's done by the band itself, and that's not bad. Like I like This Left Feels Right. Especially they do a rendition on that of Wanted Dead or Alive, where I can't describe it. You have to hear it, and it's not that different, but it's like somehow they pulled it off to be a lot more epic. And then they do Living on a Prayer, where Bon Jovi actually does a duet of Living on a Prayer with Olivia Diabo, I think that's how you pronounce her name, who, if you remember from Conan the Destroyer, not the Barbarian, Conan the Destroyer, she played the princess, the blonde princess in that. And that's awesome. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff on that album, but I'm not going to include that in the rankings here. So anyway, I'm probably not going to, they had that big compilation album, which is 100 Million Bon Jovi Fans Can't Be Wrong. I'm not going to include that here either, because that's like a lot of outtakes, and really the best song off of that in a different form ended up on Have a Nice Day from 2005 anyway. So that won't be making this list. I just want you to know that I know there's a bunch of other extant albums, live albums, and whatever else that could be included, but they're not here. So, all right, let's get into this now. The first album on here that we're going to get into is one of their latest. Not their latest, but one of their latest, and it's from 2013, and it's called What About Now? That's the name of the album. It still sold. It still did serious money. They still toured for it, and they sold out every venue. Okay, it really only had one hit that they released, and that's the very first track, which is Because We Can. Now, this isn't the first album of the bunch. Like, what happens is there's a moment, and we'll talk about this. This album is surprisingly a little bit higher on this list. They came out with Lost Highway in 2007, Bon Jovi did. And this was actually a country album. We'll talk about it. I'm not a country fan, but we'll talk about it. Okay. After Lost Highway, they came out, they've had like 3 or 4 or so albums after that. And these albums have had this very toned down, it's rock, but it's not really hard rock, and there's no really crazy riffs or anything, which maybe that's why Richie Sambora left, because he was tired of not being able to, to put in some hard riffs or something. It almost sounds like U2, and I'm not a fan of U2. In fact, U2 might be another one of the bands, though, that you could rank up there with like Bon Jovi and others, where look, they're always on top, like Metallica and Aerosmith, where they're just always on top. U2 certainly deserves to be in that ranking, I guess, even though I'm not a fan. but they started to sound sort of like U2, not as bad, because I can't handle Bono. But yeah, I mean, and a lot of those albums are actually at the bottom of this list because it's just a sound that Bon Jovi does a great job with. It's very epic and it has a lot of emotion behind it, but I'm just not feeling it. And the bulk of the songs on this album aren't bad, but they're also like nothing's really, it's not blowing up my skirt. It's not making me all excited. It's not something I listen to while I'm working out. Not that every album has to be something that I can work out to or fuck to or something, but yeah, it's just not there. In fact, I mean, the song "Because We Can," I really enjoy that. I like that. That has a little bit of guitar. I mean, not a heavy guitar, but that's got a bit of a guitar to it and everything. And not terrible, but there's not a whole lot to say about this album. Everything else on it really isn't that memorable. There's nothing terribly impressive here. So why don't we just go on to the next album? Now, the next album actually is their latest album from 2016, and it's "This House Is Not for Sale." This album has, well, a couple interesting things about this. One is they released every song from this album on YouTube ahead of the release of the album. And Bon Jovi said, look, he said, you're not, there's no point in holding back on the songs. Like, people are going to hear it one way or the other. You might as well be the person out, putting it out there out front and at least get people going to your channels. And this is the thing about John Bon Jovi that people don't know. He's an incredibly shrewd businessman, very, very shrewd businessman. In fact, he has like these 4 rules that I've personally lived by for a long, long time. He kind of has like these 4 golden rules, and I keep them written down and everything. And the main one out of it is think really, really long term. And he's obviously done that. Because I think a lot of these songs they probably wrote at the same time, but they just like would start releasing them, on various albums over a certain amount of time and everything. But and there's other rules, business rules that he lays out that are just pure gold. So he gets it. He knows the score. He's not living in the 1980s still or the 90s or something like that. He's very aware of what's going on. So you can listen to this entire album absolutely for free. You don't have to pay for Spotify or get the ad version of Spotify. You don't have to do any of that. You can go right on YouTube and rock and roll. And I like this album. It still has that sound that you were hearing in What About Now that is a little like, okay, come on, give me a little something more. Give me some more energy. But it kind of works in this. The song "This House Is Not for Sale" is fairly, it has some fair rock to it. It's got some riffage. Okay. I enjoy that. I mean, and most of the tracks are very enjoyable. "Devil's in the Temple," "Labor of Love." I mean, like there's a few good songs on this one. I really like it. And actually later on, if you get the deluxe edition where it gets into like "All Hail the King," "We Don't Run," "Goodnight New York," this is something that we'll cover as we go over all of these albums. Bon Jovi albums, some of the best Bon Jovi songs never even saw, forget about the fact that they never charted, forget about the fact that they never went on the radio. They never got released in America, like ever. They were on the, on these, on the international releases of these albums. And we'll describe that. I mean, like some of their best fucking songs ever, minus the 3 songs we mentioned earlier from Slippery When Wet. And that's criminal. Like, that's really criminal. Like, I remember, well, we'll talk about it as we break into these. But anyway, this is a band where really you want to make sure you're getting like deluxe editions or you're getting all of the bonus tracks, and you want to do the research and look into that, because those bonus tracks, I'm not kidding, are just some of the best rock you'll ever hear. But they're total bonus tracks. Never saw the light of day in America, not officially. So anyway, yeah, so "This House Is Not for Sale," good album. It's a good outing. It's a lot better than What About Now. Like by, orders of magnitude, it's better than What About Now. So anyway, let's move on from that. And then we can get into really the album that started this new sound, which was in 2009, called The Circle, which had a couple of big hits, actually. As to where the previous 2 albums I just described really only had their one major lead track hit. What About Now had, had the first track off of that. This House Is Not For Sale had the title track off of that. And with The Circle, you had two songs, or there was actually, I think, 3 songs that were a really big deal. We Weren't Born to Follow. That was a fair hit. When We Were Beautiful. It's actually a really cool, epic song. And I think that song was so big for them that they tried to make the preceding albums that came after it sort of fall into that sound, at least in some form or fashion. Because What About Now, almost the whole album sounds like When We Were Beautiful. Sounds like the song When We Were Beautiful. Superman Tonight was a pretty big song off of that album as well. So they had 3, legitimate hits off of The Circle. But it was I almost feel like, so this came just 2 years after their country album of Lost Highway. I feel like maybe they wanted to try a country album. I mean, now everybody's trying a country album, but they did it before anybody else did. Because again, Bon Jovi is a very shrewd businessman, way ahead of the curve, always is. And, John Bon Jovi. And he was doing, he was making the country albums before, Steven Tyler from Aerosmith was, or before and this pisses me off, the Rick Springfield made a country album. I mean, before all these guys were making country albums, they were way ahead of it as far as being a hard rock band, metal band that was making a country album. We'll talk about that in a minute. But anyway, I think after that, they felt like they could kind of reset their sound, because then they said, okay, well, now we can come out with just about anything as long as it's not country, even though Lost Highway did fairly well. So The Circle was, I could almost argue, kind of a downward spiral in style for me, but they're still good albums. It's just different. It's just a very, very different, or not a very different, but it's a fairly different Bon Jovi that you're listening to when you get after Lost Highway. So anyway, but then let's talk about that. Let's talk about Lost Highway. So this came out in 2007. Again, this was a really big deal. Even though it is technically a country album, they still had a major pop hit on it with a song that was barely country called You Want to Make a Memory, which is a beautiful ballad. Great ballad. I really, really like that. I mean, the whole production around it, even like the music video was good. Everything about it was good, or was enjoyable. So You Want to Make a Memory, that was the big hit off of this. I don't know. I mean, it's tough for me because I actually listen to this album a lot. I think this is a great album. And like I said, I don't like country, but it still has kind of that Bon Jovi style that we were getting used to with some of their other albums throughout the aughts, particularly, that being, Crush and Have a Nice Day. And Bounce, all 3 of those albums. Let's see, We Ain't Strangers Anymore, that did with Leanne Rimes. I don't know that was such a huge hit. But a Whole Lot of Leaving was kind of a big hit. One of the really enjoyable songs on there is We Got It Going On. Nice party song. And they get in some great metal guitar as well, electric guitar, not just more of your country styled guitar, even though country gets an electric guitar in there. But they do the song with Big and Rich, and it's pretty cool. It's a very, very fun song. Any Other Day, that's a solid song on there. There's I Love This Town. That's a fun kind of down hokum country song that I like. This is another one where if you didn't get the international edition or the deluxe edition, one of the best songs on there is Put the Boy Back in Cowboy. Holy shit, is that a fun song? That is a fun ass song. And I mean, and it's got a good dun, dun, it's got a good heavy guitar to it points to. And just hilarious and actually kind of sexy. Again, this one in particular kind of starts the trend. Or no, this doesn't start the trend, but this speaks to the trend that some of the best Bon Jovi songs you can ever hear were never released in America, not officially anyway, or not at the record stores, not at Walmart, wherever. So Lost Highway, it was a country album, but he was ahead of his time. And understand that in the late 90s and early aughts, a lot of songwriters that were in the hard rock and metal scene were names that you probably didn't even know were actually moving to Nashville, and they were starting to write songs for country singers. And they really like, I don't think a lot of people realize this. So now I don't want to get into the arguments because there's arguments to be made that country music was created by the CIA way back in the 50s or something, or even previous. I'm not even going to go there. Okay. That is a huge can of worms. But country music, I think its rise in popularity, particularly in the aughts, where it became very mainstream, and and suddenly you're having these very wild concerts. You're getting past the days of Clint Black, and Kenny Chesney and those kind of acts. Well, Kenny Chesney's another story, but anyway, I think country's really crazy rise in the aughts totally comes from the fact that metal artists and hard rock, or songwriters and everything, were invading Nashville and were taking all of their music to the next level. For example, Trace Adkins, okay? Like he had a song that was huge, Honky Tonk Badonkadonk, right? Sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? It was written by Dan Huff. Now, Dan Huff is from one of my favorite hard rock acts, that being Giant. That's the name of the band, Giant, who has had a few albums, and I've covered them on previous Patreon episodes, I think. And I mean, but you'd never know, like you're just like, oh, it's a country song. Fuck it. It's country. No, a lot of these songs are actually written by metal artists or hard rock artists and everything. And so I mean, this direction was happening. Bon Jovi was in many ways just kind of first. I'm not saying he's the first one, but he was one of the first. And I think it worked. I think it really, really worked. Certainly worked a lot better than when Def Leppard tried to do it. Fuck that shit. So anyway, let's move on to another album here. So the next album I got is actually a greatest hits. And it's one of the best-selling greatest hits albums of all time, but that's Crossroad, originally from 1994. Now, there is a bonus disc version of Crossroad that has some interesting cuts on it, but really, there's a fatal flaw with this. I mean, you would think that a Bon Jovi greatest hits should like almost be a number one just about anywhere with almost anybody. No, not with me. Because, all right, so there's some good new songs on there. Someday I'll Be Saturday Night, very cool song. In fact, sounds a lot like, it's kind of a precursor to the sound that they would start going with after Lost Highway, right? When we got into albums like The Circle, What About Now, and This House Is Not For Sale. You have Always, I think was a new track on that. And there's a couple others on there that are new tracks. Here's where it falls apart. Okay. And also, Blaze of Glory gets put on there. That's important to point out, which was from, John Bon Jovi did the score for Young Guns 2, the movie Young Guns 2. And he did a song on there called Blaze of Glory, which is an awesome song, technically a solo work, but it's so good. Kind of like that song Rosie by Richie Sambora that I mentioned. It deserves to be on a Bon Jovi album. I'm glad it got there. But there's a song, they did a remix of Living on a Prayer. They call it Prayer 94. It's terrible. It's just one of the worst fucking things. It's so bad. Like I said, there was the quote unquote remix album of This Left Feels Right, where they redid a bunch of their popular songs in completely different styles and everything. They did Living on a Prayer on there. In fact, they turned it into a duet, and it was kind of slow, but it worked. Prayer 94, horrendous, fucking horrendous. And I mean, fortunately, they still put Living on a Prayer on the album. I mean, if they didn't, I think there would have been not wild in the streets. There would have been riots in the streets. So Crossroad, it's good. And the few songs that, the 3 or so songs that are new on it are fantastic. But that Prayer 94 is so bad. It's unforgivable, So it causes this to chart very, very low. But I really do like the new songs that are off there. Like Someday I'll Be Saturday Night. I think it's such a great little song. That played well off of not what is the next album on the list, but what was the kind of the coinciding release, because they would come out with their greatest hits, and then within that year in 95, or that was 94, but then in 95, but the time frame that they actually released was within a year. They released These Days, which was also a departure. It was kind of a new sound and somewhat of a unique sound for Bon Jovi. We'll talk about that later, because that ranks very high on the list, even though it doesn't sound like most of the songs you would have, most of the hits you would have heard off of Crossroad. But let's go on to the next album. And the next album is actually one of their very early albums from 1985. So Bon Jovi started in 84. They had their self-titled album. And then the following year, again, they had all that talent. They came out with their sophomore album, which was 7800 Degrees Fahrenheit. Now, the name 7800 Degrees Fahrenheit, a lot of people don't actually know what the fuck is that. Like, why pick that temperature? What's the big deal here? Is Bon Jovi just that hot? Whew, well, maybe. But 7800 Degrees Fahrenheit is the temperature at which rock burns. You get it? Hard rock. 7800 Degrees Fahrenheit is when it melts. Not when it burns, I'm sorry, when it melts. It's a pun. I thought it was pretty clever. Most people know the song In and Out of Love, which is the title track for this album. There's some other great songs on this. King of the Mountain, Tokyo Road, Secret Dreams. I mean, like there's some genuinely great quality songs. And it has... Post-rock is actually a genre. But I think this was an attempt. This doesn't sound like anything that you would normally find under post-rock. But I feel like this was an attempt of mixing... Of trying to do something that was rock, but was something beyond that. And maybe if electronic, some kind of EDM or electronic, I mean, it's not, you can't dance to it. Don't confuse me. I'm just saying that they make rock instruments sound very, very different on this album. And I don't know what to call that. Okay. but this is a very unique album, but I enjoy the hell out of it. And I think it's pop rock, but there's something a little extra. There's something very unique about 7800 Degrees Fahrenheit. So it ranks a little bit higher up on the list here. So, but and then actually let's just do the next one. Of course, the next on here is the title or the self-titled album from '84. That being Bon Jovi's Bon Jovi. That's why it's a self-titled album. The hit Runaway is easily, just the most recognizable song off of it. It is an awesome song. Runaway is a lot of fun. Runaway is that's where it was leading into with 7800 Degrees Fahrenheit, where we can tell that this is hard rock, but you've got something different going on there. You have David Bryan, on the keyboards and everything. And I always love when a band has a keyboardist because that just adds this level of class. Like Deep Purple has a keyboardist. A lot of the bands in the 70s, a lot of the rock acts, metal acts had keyboardists at the time. Not many in the 80s would. Danger would. Sometimes people, Mötley Crüe would kind of bring it in at points, but Tommy Lee would be playing it. But that was kind of a rarity. And Bon Jovi's got it, and they make it work. They make it work really well. And Runaway is one of the places where David Bryan gets to shine. Just really gets to shine. That is such a cool song. But there's, most of the tracks on there are fantastic. In fact, don't get confused because track 4 on there is called Shot Through the Heart. That is not You Give Love a Bad Name. They're not the same song, not even remotely the same song. It just so happens that it has the title Shot Through the Heart, which everybody remembers that lyric from You Give Love a Bad Name. But, Breakout, Burning for Love is an awesome song. Burn for Love, Burn with Fire. I love that. The lyric, everything about it's great. Get Ready is a solid song. It's a great album. I really, especially for our first outing, that's amazing. What's more amazing is now their sophomore album didn't necessarily hit the same. I think this is the better album. And I've talked about many times how it's really hard for, it's easy for just about anybody to come out with one album, but compared to one hit album, but to do another one, that's the real challenge. 7800 Degrees Fahrenheit was a fair hit, but it's amazing that their third album was their biggest. It generally doesn't work that way unless you're changing styles. And I don't think they necessarily so much change styles. But regardless, we're reaching the point here where you get into the albums that I guess in my opinion are a little more they're not passable. It's not like you want to ignore them. There's great shit on them, but it's not like the must listens as to where everything from here on out is going to be a must listen. Okay. So now what I really want to do is break them down by numbers. Okay. Because we're going to do a top 7 now. Everything before the 7, you could argue about where it belongs. And I guess with this, you could still argue where they belong, but this is going to end up being a little bit different. But we'll start it with what I think some people might see as an end of an era, either this or its preceding album, which is Keep the Faith. But 1988's New Jersey, one of the biggest selling albums of all time. because it's the sequel to Slippery When Wet, which Slippery When Wet, easily one of the biggest selling albums of all time. And that's a hard act to follow coming after Slippery When Wet. However, I think Bon Jovi pulled it off, and a lot of other people obviously think that they pulled it off because this album was just huge, and it has a ton of hits on it. And it's stylistically, it's very similar to Slippery When Wet, because after New Jersey, there's a real change in sound and tone. Even though there might be one or two songs that would harken back to this time frame, or to this style. Like that's when changes started happening. And I think it's because, after you do Slippery When Wet and you do New Jersey and you're still selling out, or selling big time, the band is like, okay, now we can do a little bit of what we want. We can experiment a little. And I think that's what ends up happening after New Jersey. And even within New Jersey a bit, because later on down the album, a lot of people don't know those songs, even though there's still some very, very solid songs that come out on that. There is an Ultimate Edition of New Jersey that came out a few years ago that has a ton of bonus tracks and all this other cool stuff that you can hear from that era that I definitely recommend. But anyway, I mean, this album opens right up. It's 1988. You're opening right up with Lay Your Hands on Me, which is almost like this. It's like going to church, when you listen to this song, and then it just breaks into that dun dun dun. Come on! I mean, it's just nuts, right? That I love that song. It has a really long intro to it, but when it finally gets to its crescendo and punch, the intro is totally worth it. Like it's worth hearing it for that minute or however long it goes. And John is saying all that you want to be free from your body, you got to free your mind or something. I mean, it's just like this crazy shit, but it's so good. Or it's so cool, and it delivers and it punches right when you want it to. Then so after Lay Your Hands on Me, which is this. I mean, some people claim like Bon Jovi's a bit of a cult. Like they even have their little symbol, right? The Superman symbol with like the road in it, the road from Slippery When Wet. And like that, if you get John Bon Jovi will give that pendant to people. And if he gives you one, like you're part of the Bon Jovi family and you don't have anything to worry about for the rest of your life. I mean, so some people do consider Bon Jovi to be a little bit cultish. I don't know. But anyway, so Lay Your Hands on Me is certainly the opening, the opening hymn for any Bon Jovi show, and it should be anyway. But then it goes right into Bad Medicine, another just badass song. I mean, just wild what that gets into. Totally fits in with everything done on Slippery When Wet. I mean, just a lot of fun. And then it gets into, this is a song that I think, this is like the one song that never seems to make, though it might have been, because they did a 2-disc greatest hits that they released like in 2012. It might have been on that, but it was on this Left Feels Right. But of course, it's a remix of it, and it's a completely different song from what appears on New Jersey. But this is one of their best songs that it was a hit, but like never shows up on any of their greatest hits albums, and usually doesn't appear on a live album either. And that's Born to Be My Baby. Killer song. I mean, just a great song. Really. I mean, and actually, it feels, Born to Be My Baby feels like their first album, feels like their 84 self-titled. Easily, in my opinion, like I would maybe put that in Bon Jovi's top 5 best songs. Just fantastic. But there's other stuff. They shake it up a bit. Blood on Blood, I'll Be There For You is one of their big ballads. Stick to Your Guns. I mean, there's so many, Living in Sin. There's so many great songs on New Jersey. It really is the perfect follow-up, which doesn't always work. It doesn't always happen with when you get a major hit like Slippery When Wet was. I mean, it didn't supersede Slippery When Wet, but it's solid as a rock. I mean, like, no pun intended. I mean, it's right up there. There's no reason, like, I mean, I don't think you could do better, following that up. I mean, for example, like consider, bands actually in the similar ilk that we described earlier, where it's these people that are always on top. When you think like Metallica has their Slippery When Wet, which was for the conventional crowd was, the Black Album, right? And then they then they do Load, which is this drastic departure from what they had done on the Black Album. And they've never really returned to that sound from the Black Album. They've tried to return to their even more classic stuff, but they've never really matched the Black Album. And, I kind of wonder if it's because, and look, you have no idea how much I love Metallica. I have all their 5 and 6 disc sets and all that shit. I love Metallica. But I don't know that they could do it. I think that's the thing, is that the Black Album is such a piece of perfection. I don't think you could follow that up. AC/DC, speaking of another Black Album, Back in Black, I don't think they followed that up. I mean, that is literally the second best-selling album of all time, Back in Black, next to Thriller. You couldn't follow that up. Michael Jackson could follow it up. He followed up Thriller with Bad, and Bad is as great. I mean, it's not Thriller, but it's just the same situation where New Jersey is Bon Jovi's Bad, right? Compared to its Slippery When Wet, which is its Thriller. I mean, it's actually a perfect analogy. But nobody can think lesser of the album. I mean, New Jersey's just fantastic. But anyway, let's move on from that. So, you have that. Again, it doesn't supersede Slippery When Wet, but it's there. Now we get into, like I said, we're in our top 7 where it actually matters. So number 7 was New Jersey. Let's go to number 6. Number 6 is an album that I think it was still big. It still sold. It still had a number 1 hit. That being the title track for it, Have a Nice Day. That's the album from 2005, Have a Nice Day. I feel like it is such an underrated album. And it is the album where it suddenly made me realize, holy shit, I need to get the international versions of all of Bon Jovi's albums, because I heard, because I was really especially at this time in 2005, I was really into, for whatever reason, I was way more into Bon Jovi than usual. Why that was happening, I can't exactly remember. But anyway, so I was digging really deep, and I found these songs that weren't released in the U.S. The songs being, because normally the album in the United States ended with, I think it ended with Novocaine it ended with Story of My Life. For some reason, I was thinking it ended with Complicated, but I think it ended with Story of My Life. So there's 3 tracks that were on the international version. There's Dirty Little Secret, Unbreakable, and These Open Arms. Now, These Open Arms is a fine little ballad. Nothing wrong with that. Dirty Little Secret and Unbreakable, especially Dirty Little... I mean, they're both great, but especially Dirty Little Secret, fucking another one that totally belongs, that I would put in my top 5 Bon Jovi songs of all time. Fucking incredible. Such a sexy, naughty, dirty track. I mean, it really is. And Unbreakable is a nice little badass track. I love listening to Unbreakable when I'm working out. It's got this really heavy riff of dun 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 dun. I mean, it just hits you like a ton of bricks. It's not heavy like Suicide Silence or something, but it's heavy. For Bon Jovi, it's heavy. And I think it's such a cool song. But this album has a ton to offer, and it's really a track-for-track album, which you can't always say about Bon Jovi, where every song is really that good that you're willing to listen to it. Now, you do get little hints in here of the sound that they would eventually, shall I say, perfect, but maybe not as a good thing, but the sound that they would perfect when you get to their later albums, like The Circle, What About Now, and This House Is Not For Sale. You get little glimpses of that, but there's still plenty of hard rockers in this. The opening track, Have a Nice Day, which is actually it's a fuck you song. It's not like, oh, have a nice day. It's, more of a, Clint Eastwood, have a nice day. And then it opens up with I Have a Nice Day. Then it goes to I Want to Be Loved, which is also like a really cool, has a nice, it has Richie doing his wow, all that stuff. And then it has track 3 goes into Welcome to Wherever You Are, slower song, but it does appeal to the emotions. Like I really like that. I think it's a nice song. Who Says You Can't Go Home? This was weird. This is when the country actually started. So this country collaboration, because right after this is 2005, right after this would be Lost Highway in 2007. So they do, I think was it with Lady Antebellum? They do a country version of Who Says You Can't Go Home. and it becomes a huge hit. So actually, I should say there's like at least 2 huge hits off of this. Well, Have a Nice Day wasn't a huge hit, but Who Says You Can't Go Home was a major, major hit, especially on the country charts, because there's a country version of it. And I mean, it's a fine song without the country version. I don't really care for the country version, even though it's a duet, and that's kind of nice. But it goes into Who Says You Can't Go Home, which was a hit, whichever version you happen to listen to. And then track 5. Here, track 5 is the interesting one, okay? And this is exciting for me. So in the year previous, in 2004, they released a 5-disc box set called 100 Million Bon Jovi Fans Can't Be Wrong. Loaded with demos, unreleased songs, and all that stuff. It's a very worthy box set. It's a very well done box set. Some box sets are shit and really don't offer anything. This is a box set that's not exactly a greatest hits, but it just offers, it just gives you such a great collection of rarities from Bon Jovi that you probably just never knew existed. And some of them are like tracks from these. Again, it's one of the ways that I was introduced to tracks that were only available overseas, that weren't available in the United States, because they made them available in this collection. Not all of them, though, so you still want to be looking for those international editions. But one of the unreleased tracks on there was a song called Last Man Standing. Now, this is really interesting, and this is the power of Bon Jovi and probably why they feel confident when they do remixes and like reinterpretations of their own songs. There's a song on there called Last Man Standing. And in the booklet for 100 Million Bon Jovi Fans Can't Be Wrong, it says that this will appear on our next album. So that was cool already. When I read that, I was like, oh, shit, all right, good. There's going to be a new Bon Jovi album coming soon. Awesome. And it ended up being Have a Nice Day. And the song Last Man Standing ended up on the album. On the box set, it's this very slow, very epic. And it's genuinely an epic song. And it's all about, the song's got a great message too. It's all about like everything being computerized, whatever, and nobody actually plays instruments anymore, blah, blah, blah. And it's really cool. And it's very epic on the box set. But then when it's on Have a Nice Day, it's this really hard rocker. Really fast paced hard rocker. And I can't believe that they're the same song. At the end of the day, they're really the same song, just like with an up tempo and some, a lot more riffs, a lot more riffage, as they would say in the 90s. So that's really cool, and it works both ways. Like both versions of the song are equally as good. I might even like the one off the box set, the slower version, a little bit better because it is such an epic, like, kind of story being told, which I know you wouldn't believe that out of a Bon Jovi song, but it really is. So that's cool. Last Man Standing's cool. Bells of Freedom. I actually used to like that song a lot, but particularly more when I was a little more Yay America. But then it gets into songs that are kind of okay, but they're still very enjoyable. They still keep the pace going. Wildflower, Last Cigarette, I Am. Complicated's a good song. Then Novocaine, Story of My Life. They're all fairly good songs, and they start to kind of like hint again at that new sound that's going to be coming when we get to like 2009 with The Circle and the albums past that, and it all kind of works. But again, if you have the international edition, then you get Dirty Little Secret, Unbreakable, and These Open Arms. Again, these Open Arms is like I said, it's a very romantic, very nice, almost too cheesy ballad. Okay, great. Bon Jovi's awesome at those, obviously. So, but Dirty Little Secret and Unbreakable, holy fuck. Like, this album just kicks your ass. If hard rock can kick your ass, if you don't need metal to kick your ass, if hard rock can kick your ass, this one does it. I absolutely love this album. And in fact, it's kind of in a way, it's the end of a trilogy. Because what you get is, well, anyway, yeah, let's just go down the rest because we're going to finish up the trilogy and actually it'll go in order. So Have a Nice Day was number 6. Then we'll go to number 5, which will be Bounce, which was the album that came just previous to Have a Nice Day. And this came out in 2003. This is another one where there's a whole lot of bonus tracks that you can get your hands on. The bonus tracks, not as riveting as what the bonus tracks for Have a Nice Day were, but they're well worth it. But this is another album where, yeah, kind of track for track, it just starts hitting you right from the beginning. Undivided is a really cool song. It never really got played enough, even though I think it was supposed to be kind of a hit, but it didn't exactly happen. But it's a great opener. And then you get Every Day. That's the second track, Every Day. Awesome song. In fact, I remember when this first came out, I was playing Madden 2003, which would have come out in 2002, so it was just before I went into the military. And Every Day was one of the songs on there that would play during the menu, and I always thought it was so awesome when that would come on. I mean, but again, that just goes to show how big a deal Bon Jovi still was, is that he was getting, in 2002, he was getting lined up with all the latest acts like Andrew WK, and which he was a big deal at the time, and a lot of these other people who have really come and gone, but Bon Jovi was still there. It's just amazing. So Every Day, that's a really cool song. It has a flavor like It's My Life. Again, the three albums I'm describing here, we just did Have a Nice Day, now we have Bounce, and then we're going to get into the other. And I'm sure you can already guess what that is. They have the similar style and sound, and Richie's doing a lot of his whoa, whoa, and all that crap. But I think it's really cool. Like, this is really... I don't want to say it's my favorite Bon Jovi, but as far as like over a series of albums, it is my favorite, my favorite version, my favorite style of Bon Jovi, were these albums in the aughts, that really conquered the aughts. I mean, and these were number one sellers. Understand? These albums were not fucking around. And, this is a band almost 20 years old at this point, and they're getting put, I remember going to FYE and all the CD stores and record stores and whatever. I mean, and they're getting top placement. Oh yeah, Bounce right at the front of the fucking store. Nobody else from the 80s was getting that shit. Nobody. That's how big these guys. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say. Is that, look, Bon Jovi, like, they have, they have the clout, they have the reputation, and they have the ability because they deliver on that reputation. So yeah, Every Day, really, really, great, intense, inspirational, heavy song, or heavy for Bon Jovi, of course. After that, you go Into the Distance. Nice song, that's fine. Joey, nice song, fine. Misunderstood, that's kind of a funny song, which Bon Jovi doesn't generally do a funny song, but that kind of worked. All About Loving You, good ballad. I mean, this is another one, track for track. Every track you can listen to. Hook Me Up, here's another heavy little song that just has this really, really, I mean, the opening riff just makes you start moving. And then Right Side of Wrong, not bad. Love Me Back to Life. You Had Me From Hello. And then there's Bounce, which of course is the title track, which that's another one of the heavy ones, another like really inspirational song. I don't know. They just pulled it out where they're like, yeah, I'm going to do this. Like that was kind of the attitudes of the songs. And I thought it just worked. And then there's also Open All Night, which is not the same thing as what was on Have a Nice Day, but another nice ballad. So, just another great album, and they all have the same sound. All the same sound that started in the year 2000 with Crush, which was considered to be Bon Jovi's comeback, which I find kind of humorous because it really only had been 5 years. Like, it had been 5 years since their last album, which was These Days, which we'll talk about. So I don't quite get... like why. I mean, yeah, it's good marketing. It's a great way to get people excited about something when you say, oh, here's their comeback album, right? But admittedly, like if it were a longer amount of time, I would totally agree. This is absolutely like a comeback album. I mean, this is similar to, say, Deep Purple, coming back with Perfect Strangers. After what, I mean, I don't think that they were lackluster albums, but like as far as coming back to kind of a prominence or maybe a sound that people are digging, whatever. Yeah, it really, I mean, crushed it. It just did. I mean, this was a monster album. You have no idea. And oddly enough, it was a huge album. There weren't a whole lot of like chart topping hits. It's My Life was a big deal. I think Say It Isn't So might have done fairly well, and Just Older might have been all right. But like it's another one of those where it's track for track, and it set the tone for the previous two albums, which we just talked about. And that's the thing. That again, this is hitting at my point, is that all the great Bon Jovi songs, you probably, unless you are like me and you listen to the entire albums all the time, you missed them. You didn't hear them. And this is one where, like, there's whole stories. In fact, I've argued that Crush itself is a concept album and that there is an entire story being told in each song and it's chronological. One takes place after the other. You have It's My Life, of course, just incredible fucking song. And the music video for that is so hot. Say It Isn't So, fun little song that also had a music video. Thank You for Loving Me. That song was huge. Okay, so that was a big hit, that ballad right there. And it's a great ballad. There's a good reason that it was so huge. Two-Story Town. Man, I can feel that one. Okay, I can get the attitude that's being laid out in that. I can really understand that. Two-Story Town is this really kind of down and out song, but it's got this really cool. I almost want to call it a New Jersey guitar. Like it's just this weird like city guitar sound that exists. That Bon Jovi is one of the few that can really pull that off. It almost has, this is where you almost get a little bit still that Rolling Stones feel that I was talking about, but I'll describe that more a little bit later. Then you get Next 100 Years, not a bad song. Just Older, great song, with a great message, just saying, I haven't changed, I'm not old, just older and all that. I mean, that was a really cool, kind of message for them to put out there. Mystery Train, very slow, you can feel that song. Anybody that's ever lived in the city for a while, and I had to live, I lived in New York City, I lived in Van Nuys, I've been in cities. You can really feel a lot of these songs. Save the World, nice little ballad. Captain Crash, Beauty and the Beauty Queen from Mars, all right song. I mean, the thing is even if they're not like great songs where they're super memorable or you're not remembering the lyrics from them, the tone remarkably stays the same. Like there's never, you can just keep the record playing and it just feels right. It just keeps going and it just works. So that's why I say in this case, it's really track for track, even if every track, doesn't necessarily need to be a hit. After Captain Crash, you have She's a Mystery, nice little ballad. Here's track 11. Here's one that I never understood why this wasn't a bigger song. This should have been like by demand. I don't think they've ever played it in concert. I could be wrong about that. But the song is I Got the Girl. This is such a happy-go-lucky fucking, little guitar song that has a little bit extra riff to it. I love this. One of my, easily one of the best songs on the album. And that really, that's kind of saying something. But I Got the Girl, and then I Got the Girl ends off. And then you go into track 12 and you get this song, One Wild Night. This song was kind of a hit, but not on Crush. I'll explain more in a second. But this is another one of those really kind of fun or really like badass, punchy, kind of heavy, for Bon Jovi heavy songs that they deliver that most people, I don't think, even noticed. In fact, when they, Crush was such a huge deal that they finally released a live album from the Crush tour. They also released the DVD, which was one of the first concert DVDs I ever bought. Again, we're talking, this is 2000, the year 2000. In the year 2000, right? And they released in 2001, they released a live album called One Wild Night. Now, on that album, they had one studio track, which was not a reinterpretation, but a genuine like little bit of a remix of the song One Wild Night, which is a great rocker. And it was so weird that song never really took off, but it didn't. I love it. I listen to it all the time. The version that exists on the live album One Wild Night is fine. They made a music video for it and everything. But, again, another one of those songs that people probably fucking missed. But if you enjoyed It's My Life, it fits right in with that style. And it's just, in my opinion, it's just as good a song. And like has a really cool story to it. Again, I feel like this whole album has a whole story going. If you get the deluxe edition, there's like 3 other tracks. I Could Make a Living Out of Loving You, Hush, and You Can't Lose It, Love. Fine songs, nothing wrong with them. But the album's fine when it ends at One Wild Night. And that's just so solid. Crush, like I said, it crushed it. It was that big. It was that big of an album. I mean, you couldn't ask for a bigger comeback. But this is my problem again, is that it wasn't just a comeback of time, but they also felt like it was kind of a comeback as far as sound. Now, maybe that was because Richie Sambora was doing his whole whoa, in it and everything, and that reminded everybody of. Reminded them of Slippery When Wet. But their previous album to this, which came out, again, 5 years previous in 1995, These Days, that's the next one on our list. But, let it be said that Crush, Bounce, and Have a Nice Day, that trilogy of albums, and again, listen to the songs, not just the ones that got on the radio, listen to all the songs. There's incredible gems in all three of those albums. That's a really great era for me, for Bon Jovi. I'm not going to get into that. I was going to start talking about Alice Cooper a little bit, but anyway, just a great trilogy of a very similar sound, very similar style. And I mean, honestly, they could have ended their career with Have a Nice Day, and I would have been a very happy boy, and they would have never had to make another album. But they continued to. Things changed, and whatever. So anyway, I was going to mention our next one. This would be number 3. Crush was number 4. Now number 3 on our list is, I think, is one of 2 incredibly misunderstood albums. No pun intended with misunderstood. Misunderstood albums by Bon Jovi. These Days, which came out in 95, was a dramatic departure from the sound that they were pushing throughout the 80s and early 90s. Okay, a dramatic departure. I am totally open to that. But that doesn't mean it's not fucking awesome, because it is. A couple of the songs were hits. The major hit from it was actually the second track on it, which was Something for the Pain. But the first track, Hey God, also kind of charted. Both of those songs are fantastic. Hey God, Something for the Pain. I mean, they have, like, there's just more, I don't know how to describe it. It's not really Western. There's just more of the street sound. And this is sort of where I feel like they're almost, I mean, there's like, this is an angry album, actually. Almost every part of this is an angry album. The other song, of course, that charted off of this was Bed of Roses. Bed of Roses was the huge song. How could I not even mention that? Bed of Roses was the huge song off of Crossroad. That was the other big song off of that Greatest Hits. I mean, and that was a big, big fucking song. That was just one of their, biggest hits ever. But anyway, so this has its share of ballads as well. This Ain't a Love Song ends up with track 3. These Days, yeah, I mean, a fine song. It fits in with the tone of what's happening. Then track 5 is Lie to Me. Another one of these songs. This is a track-for-track album, but this is another one of those songs, like, it fits it where it's like a slow kind of ballad. But this is, like I said, this whole album these days, angry and depressed. That's the way to describe this. And damn, do you feel it. That wasn't meant to be a pun, because track 6 is Damned. That's a fine song, keeps the tone going. Here's the real gem in this, next to maybe like Hey God, which is probably, that'd be my second favorite song off of this. And that's track 7, which is My Guitar Lies Bleeding in My Arms. This is a really depressing, angry, epic song that nobody hears. I mean, it's epic, and it gets, man, I mean, it'll rip your heart out and stomp on it. Like, it is, wow. Sometimes, when I'm writing short fiction or anything that, and I need to like dredge up some emotions, this is one of my go-to songs for when I need some epicness, some epic anger. It's not anger like, it's not Painkiller from Judas Priest or something, but it's anger over like a loss and everything. I mean, it's just really, really something. But the rest of the songs, they all kind of match that same, a similar tone. They all fit in with what the album is trying to say. And I like it. I mean, I understand why it wasn't as big a hit with a lot of people as far as, Bon Jovi fans, because again, this was a huge change. But shit, I think they delivered. I mean, this is something special. This is a really, really special album. I think gets ignored, and that's a pity, because Something for the Pain's a good song. That's the only one that really got. I mean, This Ain't a Love Song, I think, got some radio play as well, but that's the one that got the major radio play, because it's the only one that's remotely happy. Everything else is just fuck you, and I like that. But people miss this. They have no idea that this came out in 95, and they completely forget about it. And usually they just think, oh yeah, they did. I mean, maybe they'll remember Keep the Faith. Or they'll just think, oh yeah, they did New Jersey, then they came out with Crush. I mean, that's how a lot of people, think about Bon Jovi, and that's a fucking pity. So these days, at number 3, very different album, but when you get it, if you feel it, and you know why it's number 3. Next one is actually the big one. I'm not going to give it number 1. I think if anybody's actually knows the discography for Bon Jovi, you were probably expecting me to say, oh yeah, we're going to do Keep the Faith. No. Slippery When Wet. So now you probably know what number 1 is, but we'll get to it. So Slippery When Wet, which came out in 86, again, as we've been saying this whole time, just no bones about it. It's one of the biggest albums in history. It has 3 or 4 of the greatest rock songs ever done by anybody. I don't care. Name the fucking band. It doesn't matter. These are 3 of the biggest songs in history. And anybody will tell you that. Any musician will tell you that. It's worth their fucking salt. I've heard punk rockers fucking talk about it, and they say that no, those songs are just amazing. Everybody knows it. This album was huge. And is that enough reason to give it number 1? Yeah, sure. But for me, as a Bon Jovi fan, it doesn't take that spot. I mean, yeah, it's kind of a situation where, like, similar to Back in Black, right? With AC/DC, where, there's some songs like You Shook Me All Night Long where, yeah, like I can't listen to that anymore. Like that's one. And it's hard for me to have a song where it's been played too much. That one's been played too much. But yeah, I mean, this album's amazing. It'd be disrespectful if I put it any lower. You open it up with Let It Rock, which is another one of those, just like New Jersey, how New Jersey opens up with what is effectively like a church hymn. Let It Rock comes off that way, but with metal, with electric guitar. You Give Love a Bad Name. What the fuck do I need to say about that? Living on a Prayer. What do I need to say about that? Social Disease. Great song. Opens up with like moaning and everything. And Dr. Bon Jovi, please report to that. I mean, that's so much fun. This is a fun album. This is a ridiculously fun album, and track for track, of course, like every song on here every song could have been a hit. Every song is fucking awesome. You Wanted Dead or Alive, what do you need to say? Even that's fun. And that's like kind of a serious song. Now it's to the point of cheese, but I get it. Raise Your Hands, made popular by Spaceballs, one of the best songs ever done. Without Love, awesome ballad. I Die For You, badass fucking song. Like, I mean, just, it's a love song, but it's a hard-hitting love song. I love that. Never Say Goodbye, perfect ballad. Wild in the Streets, beautiful celebration. Fuck yeah, let's get wild in the streets. Now, there's been like various different packaging of this. I've never seen where there's like extra tracks for this. I think any extra tracks that existed for Slippery When Wet just ended up getting put on New Jersey. So no matter what edition you get of this, like you'll find some like live tracks and maybe an acoustic version of something here and there. But this album is perfection. You don't add anything to it. You just leave it be. Maybe you remaster it or something, make it sound a little bit better on modern sound systems. But it is one of the ultimate rock albums. And like I said, you talk shit about Bon Jovi all you want. You ask the musicians you love, they'll tell you this. They'll tell you exactly what I just said. I mean, you can't argue it. I mean, would you say Back in Black was a terrible album? Nobody would say that. Even like pop singers won't say that, and I think it's true for this as well. So I don't need to spend a bunch of time on it. Millions of albums sold. I mean, again, like I said, Bon Jovi has over 100 million albums sold worldwide. Half of those are probably this, worldwide. It's probably around half that are just Slippery When Wet. I mean, because this is a masterpiece. However, like I said, and we want to wrap this up a bit. And you probably know every song off there. One of my points in doing this is to introduce you and to mention to you songs that you probably never heard before. And we've mentioned a ton of them, except for when it's in like the lower down albums. Those, there's not a whole lot to listen to on some of those. But, that's Slippery When Wet. You probably know every song. So take that for what you will. Now, the number 1 album, let's do this. Drum roll, please. You already know what it is, though, because I said it. 1992's Keep the Faith. Phenomenal. And the only reason that I think this album isn't as well known, a lot of people might know the song Keep the Faith, but maybe I Believe or In These Arms, you might know those, might. The only reason, I mean, just they didn't play enough of they didn't allow enough of the songs that are on this onto radio. That's the only reason this album isn't as well known. If any, I mean, it's hard to say that it would match Slippery When Wet as far as like levels of perfection, but there is such a wonderful variety of style and emotion and so much else on this album that you really can't hear anywhere else. This is the album where, like I said, some of the songs really feel like something the Rolling Stones would have done. And that's a fucking feat. Do you understand? Like, that's a musical, a hill to climb. All right. So the album opens up with I Believe, which is a fine song. I mean, and it kind of does the job of being a good opener, just like Slippery When Wet and New Jersey had. Okay, not the best song on the album, but it was kind of a hit, and it was, it's a cool song, and it fits in with kind of I think the '90s vibe, because it sort of has a rebellious tone to it, and it works. The second track is Keep the Faith. A lot of people know that, and that one definitely has that church hymn kind of feel to it almost, which is, they can pull that off because they have a keyboardist, right? They have one of the best keyboardists in the world. They have David Bryan. Keep the Faith is a good song. Most people, like I said, most people know that. That's usually, if there's a track that gets included off of this album, it's usually Keep the Faith. But also nowhere near the best song on this album. Track 3, this is when business starts to pick up on this album, okay? But nobody's heard this song. I'll Sleep When I'm Dead. This has this really like, I almost want to play it for you because it's so hard to describe. This is where they start to have almost that Rolling Stones feel, but with like, a lot of modern stylings. And it just works. And it is a fun song. And yeah, I mean, almost innocent in what it's doing, which granted, that doesn't make it so Stones, when you have the Rolling Stones saying you can make a dead man come, right? But this is a fun, it almost sounds like something you would hear right out of the 60s. But again, it has sort of that 80s, 90s modern vibe, and it works. Similar, the only people who did anything similar is like Poison, is the band Poison, where in their early works, where CeCe just had this guitar that sounded like it was out of like the doo-wop days, but then it's metal. But then it's hard rock. Same kind of thing here, to a little bit of a different degree. Not exactly the same as Poison. Poison just has an incredibly unique sound, and kudos to them for that. That's another band that I would love to do a ranking on, because just one of my favorites. So, In These Arms, or after I'll Sleep When I'm Dead. Okay, correction. So this is the album Bed of Roses was off of. I think when it came out on Crossroad, it might have been the bigger deal, but Bed of Roses was off of this, which made it a huge seller. But again, most people don't know the other songs. After I'll Sleep When I'm Dead, which is a really fun song, you get this great epic. I mean, you can't really call it a ballad. It's a love song. But In These Arms, it was kind of a hit, but not everybody remembers it. Awesome song. Nice and epic. Once the chorus hits, I mean, you're on board. I love In These Arms. Fantastic. After that is then, of course, the great epic Bed of Roses, that, one of the biggest charting ballads in the history of the world. I don't know what I need to say about that, but that's originally off of this. I was thinking Bed of Roses was off of Crossroad, but no, it's on Keep the Faith. That's another one of those tracks, like, I can't listen to it anymore. I'm done. Like, I don't need that. And there's not even like a moment in my life. Like, the video's hot. The music video's really hot. But there's not even a moment in my life where I like find that song necessarily applicable. So whatever. But the song after that I listened to is probably my most listened to song off of this album. And that is If I Was Your Mother. I know you think the name sounds crazy. This is a wild, heavy epic. Okay, kind of slow moving, but it is an epic. When you hear the song, the title makes perfect sense. Tell me what I got to do to make my life mean more to you. Anyway, the lyrics aren't exactly hitting me right now, but pretty much saying it's like, I want to be as close to you as your mother is, like, things like that. Like, I mean, it's this, I mean, the songs I'm telling you about now, these are the biggest ones. next to maybe the stuff off of Have a Nice Day, that people just didn't know were out there, and they are so different. They have nothing to do with Slippery When Wet. They have nothing to do with what people think of when they think of Bon Jovi's sound, and yet they are incredible songs, each one in their own right. They are, mini masterpieces, every single one of them. Dry County, another one where there's this great story being told, has this very interesting kind of Western flair to it, almost a depressing flair, which kind of points, If I Was Your Mother in Dry County points to where they were going with These Days. Them going to These Days, that sound with These Days was the direction they were going anyway. It had nothing to, I really don't think that it had much to do with Nirvana. Maybe there's an interview out there where John Bon Jovi says differently or Richie says differently, but as far as I know, in my book, they had been planning to go to that sound for some time, just like they were in the early aughts, how they were planning to go to the sound like The Circle and everything, and eventually start sounding like U2 or something. But right after Dry County, anyway, we get into the next track. It gets right back into the fun. Woman in Love, another one of those songs, almost sounds like a modern Rolling Stones. Incredible. Just a lot of fun, and has this little it's just tons of fun. Then you get the next track is Fear, one of the weaker tracks on there. I Want You, fine song, not up to snuff with some of the other ones I've just been mentioning, but fine song. Track 11, Blame It on the Love of Rock and Roll. Here's another one. Tons of fun. Has the same tone as Woman in Love and I'll Sleep When I'm Dead. Has the same happy-go-lucky vibe, almost that Rolling Stones sound. Awesome. Again, nobody's fucking heard it. And they don't know. And all they think is when they hear Bon Jovi, they think It's My Life, or they think, Living on a Prayer, or You Give Love a Bad Name. They have no idea that they can pull off completely different styles of songs that are incredible. And that's part of the reason. The rest of the songs, are fine. It's a little bit of Soul after that, and then Saber Prayer. They're all good songs. But this is the thing. This is why I put Keep the Faith at number 1. It has the most range. It's missing, except for maybe In These Arms. No, even that. It's missing a lot of the unique sound of, say, New Jersey or Slippery When Wet. But there is just such a varied degree of styles in this album alone. And it's hard to believe how many different, while not every song is different, there's 3 or 4 different styles, and there's 3 or 4 songs, because it's a 13-track album. There's 3 or 4 different songs that get to parlay that style. And I think that's really unique. I think that's an incredible achievement for them to do. And people just they skip this album. And you know who else loves this album? And I feel really vindicated in putting it at number 1. Eddie Trunk, who is maybe the greatest rock and metal DJ in history. Eddie Trunk, says, he says those songs that never made radio on Keep the Faith. He says those are some of the best songs Bon Jovi's ever done, straight up. And that's saying something, because how many number 1 fucking hits does Bon Jovi have? They have tons, over their 20, 30-year career. Okay. People that actually listen to music and actually listen to albums instead of singles, they know the score. They know just how great this album is, and how much fun it is. Now, granted, if, I don't mean this to sound insulting, there's people who don't like to have fun in their music. They want everything to be, angry, depressing. And look, I like that too. That's what I was talking about with These Days. Or I could talk about all the butt rock and everything else that I'm totally into all that. Please understand. I don't have a problem with it. Okay. But I also want the entire emotional spectrum of humanity in my music. And this is one of those albums that actually will deliver, pretty much fire on all counts. I think I'm mixing my metaphors here, but whatever. This is one that does that delivers that. But, there's people who really they refuse to listen to any kind of music that's feel good or any kind of music that's happy. Okay. I don't exactly understand that, but all right. That's fine. I'm not here to judge you. And I want people to listen to what they want to listen to. But, if you can get into the feel good songs, almost the Rolling Stones-ish songs on Keep the Faith, you will not be disappointed. This is, I mean, trust, you will love listening to this album and go all the way through. Listen to the whole damn thing, because that's one thing Bon Jovi can do. You know, AOR, they can do album-oriented rock, right? I mean, they can do, they can make it where you want to listen to the entire album, and the entire album gives you a story and it gives you a feel. And yeah, I mean, I don't know many other bands that can really do that. Like the other bands that I listed off that have the ability to stay on top, I don't think any of them pull that off. U2 might come close, but I hate U2. Like yeah, someone's going to take that out of context. I hate the band U2. You know, Metallica, yeah, Metallica can kind of do it, but then Metallica kind of has one speed, kind of. I know they can do slower shit, but you know, they have one attitude, I guess I should say, not one speed. They have one attitude. So you don't really get it there. Aerosmith, I mean, Aerosmith can make a track for track album. You know, you listen to Rocks, you listen to, oh man, I mean, Nine Lives, even their, you know, later stuff. But it never like flows as well. Somehow Bon Jovi figured out how to make things flow and make things work and make the songs make sense. Like everything sounds like it absolutely belongs right on that album, right next to all the other songs. And I think that's a very rare achievement for a band to do. And I challenge people to find me someone who's done that and at the same time, you know, just charted. You know, I mean, just like made crazy hits at the same time. I mean, yeah, a lot of people can make a concept album, but then most of those songs aren't going to be hits. It's where Bon Jovi, and look, I'm not saying that having a hit on the Billboard 100 or something is some kind of like thing to aspire to or some kind of metric that decides what's great music or not. Not really. I'm just saying to be able to pull that off is something. Let's give credit where credit's due. To be able to do that, but then still have the entire album make sense, even when you have 4 or 5, you know, chart-topping hits. Most people can't do that. Let's just say it. Most people can't do that. And yeah, art is subjective, but there are objective metrics that you can look at. There are numbers that you can look at in certain aspects of art. That doesn't mean that Bon Jovi's better than Kiss. It doesn't mean Bon Jovi's better than Against Me. It doesn't mean anything like that, okay? But it does mean that they have some metrics where they can say, motherfucker, I'm pretty good. And right on. So anyway, my point in doing this is hopefully to introduce you and to maybe get you to reconsider some of these bands. You know, in fact, I'll tell you a funny story. So the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy and I, hopefully she won't mind me telling this story. We were working out the other day, and usually, you know, we decide, I mean, and actually I just, you know, I don't care. Stephanie can choose, you know, who's going to play what audio. And, you know, we play audio in our gym, and she let me pick the audio. I'm like, okay, cool. You know, and I was like, oh, you know, or what did I say? I was like, I was going to put on Creed or something was sounding similar to Creed. And she goes, oh my God, I hate Creed. I said, no. I said, no. You didn't hear Weathered. You never heard their album Weathered. Okay. Which was their third album after, was it Human Clay? And then the first one, whatever the fuck that was, they had one on it. I said, trust me, you never, ever heard Weathered. I was like, you would not say that if you heard that. And she's like, but aren't they a Christian band? I said, no, you got to hear Weathered. And so she gave it a shot. You know, kudos, credit to her for being willing to experiment and listening to it, because certainly when you tell me to put on music, it's a roll of the dice. You know, you have no idea what the fuck's going to, you know, David Hasselhoff could start playing. You have no idea. And so I you know, Weathered from Creed opens right up with Bullets, which is a genuinely heavy ass song. I mean, and Scott Stapp's screaming. You know, like it's a heavy song. And it opens right up with that, and she's listening, she goes, wow. You know, I mean, it effectively, you know, not that she was wrong in any way, but I was right in that, you know, I said, okay, yeah, I get your opinion of Creed, but you had never heard this album. And when she heard it, she was like, wow, holy shit. Like track for track, she was loving it, except for there's the one song that sounds like Can You Take Me Higher off of Human Clay. You said it, yeah. She said it sounded satanic. You might have just heard her speak, and she's actually working out next to me. I'm already done with my workout. But yeah, I mean, she said it sounded satanic, and I was like, yeah, I mean, Scott Stapp, don't let him fool you. He played the Christian card for a little while, but I've seen the fucking videos where he's, fucking gals with Kid Rock before a show. But anyway, Weathered is such a heavy album. It is such a, there's a couple of cheesy songs on it, but overall, that is again, the stuff you never heard on the radio, even though Bullets did get some radio play. The songs you never really heard on the radio were all fantastic. Nobody here ever hears these songs. That's my point, is that when people tell me, like, this is probably going to toss out everything I said right out the window, but fuck it. Like when people tell me that Nickelback sucks, I want to say the same thing. No, you haven't listened to the songs that never went on the radio. You just heard Rockstar and you got pissed off, or you bought into what everybody else is fucking saying, or you heard something off of Silver Side Up. Is that their big breakout album? Not their first album, but their big breakout. You heard something off of that. Okay, great. You heard, yeah, I'm with you. It sucks. But let's listen to their other music that never saw radio, and their songs that will kick your ass. Next Contestant, right off the same album as Rockstar. There's a ton. Even off their newer shit. I'm not saying every Nickelback album's great. It's not. I didn't care for, I thought Curb was rough. Was it Here and Now? The one with I think I had that song about standing together or something. That was, that song was okay, but the bulk of the album was shit. I'm not blindly loving what they do. I'm just saying, you never listened to the whole album. You have no fucking idea that there's great fucking songs, like really great fucking songs on there that deserve the light of day. And that's, and that's why I like to do these sorts of things, because people they just don't know. The MTV doesn't play it. The radio doesn't play it. Spotify doesn't of course Spotify doesn't fucking put it on their algorithms. Google Play Music doesn't put it on their algorithms. Well, no shit. Algorithms are mind. Well, I was going to say algorithms are mind control. They are, but I'm being a little extreme in saying that right now. So there you have it. Okay. And so Bon Jovi, reconsider, check out the albums you probably never heard these days. Probably give it a shot. This is some epic shit. Get rid of get the picture of Bon Jovi with his hair, unless you're a woman and you think he's hot. Get that out of your head. You don't need it. Just listen to the music and enjoy the music for what it is. This is the same thing when I tell people I listen to Rick Springfield and they go, "Oh, Jesse's Girl." And I'm just like, shut up. That song sucks. Like, let's talk about the rest. Put on his live album Alive, and you tell me that that's not one of the most badass live albums and badass series of songs you've ever heard. That guy is a hard rocker, man, but nobody knows. And nobody, for whatever reason, they don't want to trust me to listen to it. Okay. So anyway, look, when I think something's just, I like it because it's cheesy, I admit to that. I have no problem admitting to that. All right. But other times I call shots and I listen to shit and I know, no, that's fucking good. So I had too much time in my hands as a teenager. That's really what it boils down to. All right. Anyway, that's it. There's my little screed. That's it for this little Bon Jovi special. I hope you gave it a chance. If you're into listening to, to my reviews of music and everything, which I know a lot of Sovereign Tech listeners are, I hope you enjoyed it. And more content to come out for, of course, there'll be a new Sex and Science Hour. I just released a video of me getting the SNES Classic, the SNES Classic. That's for patrons only. And then also, we've got a Dynamite Sovereign Tech lined up. It's just going to be a great time. And User is coming. Before you ask, yes, it is. Woo! I will see you on the other side.